Hey guys, tonight we were venturing somewhere colder than your ex's heart and emptier than your boss's promises. Tsarist-era Siberia. Yes, before the Soviet Union built the Gulag franchise, the Tsars were already shipping people thousands of miles away into an enormous snow-covered oops-all-freezer called Siberia. Not for fun, mostly for forever. Imagine being sentenced to a blizzard with chores. Delicious. Before you melt into your mattress like decorative late-stage capitalism slime. Take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. If not, that's cool. I will simply stare at your profile photo and play melancholic balalaika music. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what temperature it is. Someone is always at 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Must be nice. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for maximum cozy whoosh energy, get comfortable, and tuck your feet in because tonight, frostbite isn't a threat unless your cat is feeling spicy. Let us pause. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to be exiled to Siberia by the Tsar? How do you march thousands of miles without your Fitbit judging you? Did people ever thaw out, or did they just accept that they now lived inside a frozen lasagna? What did they eat when the government rations ran out snow? More snow? Did anyone ever look at a wolf and think honestly we should date? Were there hobbies besides, not dying? If you escaped, did you just keep walking forever until you found a McDonald's? Congratulations, you've just woken up somewhere in the 1700s. Yes, Siberia. The temperature is negative, you don't want to know. Your nose froze off twice already, and you have to chop wood before breakfast. Good luck. You're not in Siberia, yet you're walking to it. Because nothing says justice like walking several thousand miles in chains. That's right. Your punishment begins before you even arrive at the punishment. Your journey is quite literally a walk of shame, except instead of a hangover and misplaced dignity, you've got state-issued irons and a guard named Fyodor who hasn't smiled since Ivan the Terrible was a toddler. The road ahead stretches so far you can see the end, which feels both symbolic and deeply inconvenient because you forgot to pack snacks. Let Cess talk about your outfit. It is less winter-ready parka and more surprise autumn picnic. Thin wool, patched linen, and boots that think their job is optional. Every gust of wind slices through you like the world's most aggressive exfoliation. And since you're walking in a long chain gang line, you can't even adjust your clothing with dignity. When you scratch your nose, 7 other people have to commit. The snow isn't always there, but the mud. Oh, the mud. Imagine hiking through chocolate pudding, except the pudding hates you and wants you to sprain an ankle. When it is dry, the road is a dusty wasteland. When it is wet, you are basically a shoe-shaped soup. Dumpling. Sometimes you pass villages where locals stare at you with the universal expression of, wow, glad that's not me. Breakfast, if you call it that. You're handed a small piece of bread that has a personality best described as brick-like. It tastes vaguely of wheat, dreams, and nothing else. You chew it in silence while staring at the horizon, wondering if coffee was ever real, or just a myth invented to torture future exiles. The guards, by the way, get better rations than you. They eat with the smacking joy of people without a moral compass, while you consider gnawing on a pine cone. By midday, your legs feel like they belong to someone else, someone whose warranty has expired. Each step clips against iron, and if the chains snag, you stumble and take 2 or 3 fellow prisoners down with you. It's like synchronized swimming, but during the apocalypse. Someone coughs behind you. Someone wheezes ahead of you. Someone farts and blames the wolf pack shadowing the group. It's a community. Speaking of wolves, yes, they follow. Not Disney wolves that marry princesses. These wolves see your group as a rolling all-you-can-eat buffet with excellent pacing and no defensive strategy. At night, they lurk at the edge of camp, licking their teeth, whispering encouragement to Frostbite. Let's talk about sleeping arrangements. They're untieny. When camp is called, you may get lucky enough to huddle inside a barn with 40 new best friends. Otherwise, you curl up under a tree like a very pathetic Christmas ornament. If you were really lucky, you get straw. If you're unlucky, someone sneezes on it first. Cozy. Nighttime conversations are bleakly comforting. Someone reminisces about the good old days like last year when they still had toes. Another person recites poetry from memory, mostly because their childhood teacher was strict and this is finally paying off. You, meanwhile, stare at the stars and wonder if any of them are heating lamps. When morning arrives, so does the guard with the world's most aggressive wake-up call, yelling. He yells a lot. You stand, stretch, and instantly regret stretching. Breakfast is more bread, prize. Sometimes, if you're incredibly fortunate, someone hands out dried fish. You eat it gratefully, ignoring its texture, which is best described as salty violin string. As the march continues, you begin to bond with your fellow unfortunates. A former noble walks beside a peasant. A political dissident swaps stories with someone whose only crime was being in the wrong tavern at the wrong time. Siberia doesn't discriminate, everyone gets cold the same. You cross rivers cold, fast, uncaring. You wade through them with the clumsiness of a toddler learning to walk, except the stakes are frostbite and death instead of embarrassment. Water sloshes into your boots, instantly trying to freeze your ankles into decorative popsicles. Every now and then, the group passes a post station, one of the rare places where you can rest. Indoors. These stations are crowded, smoky, and smell like every bad decision humanity ever made, but they're warm. You melt into a wooden bench and briefly fantasize about never standing up again. But eventually you do. You always do. The road to Siberia stretches onward, and you march with the resigned energy of someone who has accepted their fate. Cold, hunger, and a future where the sun is more rumor than reality. And through it all, the only constant is the rhythm of your feet crunch, squelch, drag, repeat. A monotony so profound it becomes almost meditative. Almost. As you trudge forward, you begin to understand the real punishment. Not the exile, not the chains, not even the cold, but the sheer endlessness of the journey, where each day looks exactly like the one before. Welcome to the march. You haven't even arrived and you're already exhausted. Let us talk accessories. You're wearing iron chains, cold, heavy, and absolutely not runway approved. They are the it item of the season, assuming the season is eternal misery, and the aesthetic is medieval clanking goblin. These are under dainty bracelets or edgy industrial chic. These are heavy, deliberately uncomfortable, and designed by a committee of bureaucrats who firmly believed fashion should hurt. They jingle relentlessly as you walk, as though you're a depressed reindeer with no career prospects. Their sensation is unforgettable. The metal rubs your wrists and ankles like an exfoliating scrub made by someone who hates you personally. After an hour, your skin is raw. After a day, you've developed blisters. After a week, you've formed a permanent emotional bond with the iron, like a deeply toxic relationship that neither of you requested but can't seem to end. You start giving the shackles a nickname, because at this point they are basically roommates. Now, these chains are not one size fits all. They are one size fits nobody. They are either brutally tight, cutting into your skin, or laughably loose, bouncing around like deranged slinkies. Some prisoners wrap their sleeves or scraps of cloth beneath the metal to reduce chafing. It helps about as much as putting a band-aid on a volcano. Every step you take is accompanied by a metallic clink that broadcasts your presence to everyone within earshot. Privacy is a myth. It's impossible to sneak to the bushes for a private moment when you sound like a pocketful of angry spoons. The wolves hear. The guards hear. Even the disgruntled squirrels hear. You are sonically exposed. The chains aren't just around your limbs. Sometimes they connect to the people beside you. Because nothing encourages camaraderie like being physically attached to a stranger who can walk at your preferred speed. If they trip, you trip. If you trip, 3 other people trip. It's a team sport of mutual suffering. You develop synchronized stumbling, the world's least impressive form of choreography. Let's take a moment to compare this to modern accessories. Today we spend hundreds of dollars on smartwatches that track our steps. In Tsarist Siberia, the shackle's your fitness tracker. Every jangle reminds you that you walked. Every bruise is a progress badge. You'd get a congratulatory notification if electricity had been invented. At night, you don't get to remove the chains. They stay on, like a permanent metal hug that you never consented to. Sleeping becomes a tactical puzzle. Which position will hurt the least? Spoiler, none. You drift off to sleep with your wrists awkwardly pinned, only to wake because your neighbor rotated in their sleep and pulled your arm with them. It's like being involuntarily spooned by destiny. When it rains, the shackles get slick and cold, gripping your skin like icy tendrils. When it's hot, they absorb heat and brand your flesh like you're cattle being stored for later. Siberia doesn't do temperature moderation. It does extremes. Your iron jewelry responds accordingly, becoming either a portable ice pack or a stovetop. The guards have keys, of course. They carry them like smug walking reminders of freedom. Sometimes a guard dramatically jingles the keys while you were eating your brick bread ration, just for fun. You fantasize about accidentally losing those keys down a well. If you're lucky, and I mean galaxy-level lucky, you might be assigned lighter chains, or even temporary removal during certain types of labor. But lucky in Siberia means only moderately tortured. You celebrate small victories, like when your shackle doesn't saw into your ankle every step, or when Fyodor forgets to lock the connector chain between you and a sneezy neighbor. Occasionally someone tries to get creative with their irons. A cloth wrap here, a bit of fur padding there, little DIY projects to make their accessories less murderous. It is Siberian Fashion Week. Spoiler, no one is impressed. Even the wolves roll their eyes. Sometimes you notice the connecting chain has become a social equalizer. Nobles, peasants, scholars, pickpockets, it doesn't matter. Everyone clanks the same. The guy who once owned an estate now limps beside a farmer, and both are united by shared discomfort and questionable hygiene. The shackles erase ranking faster than bankruptcy. Every once in a while, someone jokes that at least the chains keep your hands warm. Everyone laughs, then everyone cries, because ironically, cold metal conducts cold. Your bones feel like they are freezing from the outside in, and you start to wonder if your wrists will someday snap off like tiny icicles. Some prisoners get so used to the sound of the shackles that they stop noticing it, like living next to a train station. Others develop elaborate mental games pretending the jingle is music, composing imaginary songs to distract themselves. B-flat Shackle Symphony, Movement 1. Today, I didn't die. At last, after many weeks, the pain dulls. Not because the chains stop hurting, but because your nerves give up. The iron has become part of you. You realize that in Siberia, fashion isn't about style, it's about survival. And right now, survival comes in the form of noisy, uncomfortable metal that refuses to leave you alone. Congratulations, you're officially accessorized for exile. At night, you sleep wherever the marching stops. Sheds, barns, or sometimes outside. Yes, outside is now a location in your life, not a vibe. Your new bedtime routine is simple. Try not to freeze, try not to get eaten, and try not to spoon a stranger unless forced by climate change. Warmth is a group sport now, whether you like it or not. Personal space is a luxury that melted away somewhere back in European Russia. Most evenings, the guards decide it's time to stop because it is dark, or because their horses are tired, or because someone possibly you collapsed meaningfully. You shuffle into whatever structure is nearby. A barn, a hut, or a smaller barn pretending to be a hut. These buildings were built with optimism and poor insulation. The walls allow wind to enter freely, as if the architecture is helping the weather assassinate you. Inside the barn, you're greeted by hay. Not fresh, romantic hay, no. This hay has seen things. It's lived a long and troubled life. It's home to insects, dust, and at least 7 types of funk. You spread it round to make a bed, which is like saying you made a bathtub out of bubble wrap and wishful thinking. You lie down and wonder how many cows have napped here before you. Probably millions. Good for them. Sleeping inside is better than outside, though. Outside is for the unlucky and the loud snorers. If you're stuck outdoors, you huddle under a tree like a disappointed squirrel. One prisoner tries to use his coat as a blanket. Another tries to use his blanket as a coat. Everyone fails. The cold creeps into your bones like it's paying rent. Let's talk about pajamas. You sleep in the same clothes you've been marching in for months, sweaty, crusty layers of wool and regret. They smell like everything you've ever done wrong. On the bright side, no one around you smells better, so there is a comforting group identity. We are moist, tired, and here against our will. It's quiet at night, except that it's not. Every sound feels amplified in the darkness. Someone coughs, someone groans, someone cries gently into their shackles. The guards mutter threats around a fire, occasionally laughing at jokes no one else understands, probably about how their job benefits include shoes that don't dissolve in mud. Sometimes you dream of your old bed. Maybe add soft blankets, a decent mattress, maybe even a pillow. Oh, you fool. Now your pillow is your elbow, and your blanket is whatever emotional support straw you found first. You curl up wishing for comfort, only to feel a tiny insect do a hostile takeover of your scalp. If it is winter, and it usually is, your breath fogs in the air. You fall asleep watching it drift away, fantasizing that is your soul escaping. The temperature drops so low that your eyelashes frost shut, which is fun because now not only can you not sleep, you also can't open your eyes to complain about it. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your body aches from marching. Your limbs are stiff from the shackles. Your mind is busy whispering, "Are we there yet? When will I next encounter warm soup? Why do wolves sound so organized?" You roll over, pulling the chain with you, which yanks the ankle of the person beside you. They hiss. You hiss back. It's practically a friendship. If you get a spot near the communal stove, congrats. You now have a 30 chance of surviving the night. The stove is old, smoky, and emits heat, the way your Wi-Fi emits reliability, occasionally and never when needed. But you cling to that warmth like it's your last shred of sanity. When the fire dims, someone feeds it with twigs, bits of scrap, and possibly emotional baggage. Some nights, rain falls. It hits the roof like 1,000 little reminders that the universe has a sense of humor. The roof leaks. Of course it does. You roll away from the drip, only to land in someone else's drip. Eventually you accept that wetness is part of your personality now. If you're very unlucky, you camp in open fields. No walls, no roof, just a silent meadow, and Siberia telling you to reconsider your life choices. The sky stares down at you. You stare back, briefly contemplating philosophy. What is sleep? Why does suffering exist? Will someone steal my shoe in the night? The answer is probably. Modern comparison? Imagine the worst Airbnb you've ever stayed in. Now remove the mattress, pillow, food, central heating, walls, furniture, host communication, and bathroom. Replace them with cold dirt, wolves, and existential dread. Also, the other guests are prisoners and nobody gets to leave a review. When morning finally arrives, you're awakened by a guard shouting something encouraging like, "Get up or else." You pry your eyes open, crack your back, and attempt to disentangle yourself from the chain and human macrame that developed overnight. It is time to march again, because your suffering must remain in motion. Stationary misery is apparently too luxurious. Your joints creak. Your hair is frozen. Your bread is colder than business class passengers' hearts. You eat anyway, because what choice do you have? The sun barely peeks over the horizon. You stand, shiver, and begin walking, thinking, maybe tonight I'll sleep better. You 1T. But hope is the only bedding you can reliably carry. You get a piece of bread so dense it could double as construction material. Seriously, this loaf could repair a cathedral. Forget sourdough starter. This thing was probably born from a meteor. You hold it in your hands and wonder whether to eat it or use it as a weapon. It is the texture of a brick, the color of sadness, and the flavor of also sadness. If bread could give you trust issues, this would be that bread. Each morning, a guard distributes the portions with the solemnity of someone handing out rare jewels. In a way, he is except these jewels taste like punishment and contain the nutritional value of a beige crayon. He does not look you in the eye when he hands it to you. He simply drops it in your palm and walks off, knowing full well it will hurt you emotionally. You examine the bread carefully. Is it stale? Absolutely. Has it ever been fresh? Doubtful. Is it possibly older than you are? Yes. At some point in the last century, this loaf was baked, promptly forgotten, rediscovered, and declared perfect for prisoners. You're pretty sure one corner has a fossil. Now, before taking a bite, you must mentally prepare. You contemplate your life choices. Then, like a medieval beaver with low self-esteem, you gnaw. The sound echoes. Cruck. A small piece flakes off, causing a minor avalanche of crumbs into your lap. You chew. It resists. It fights back. Modern jaw surgeons would marvel at your endurance. To wash it down, you might get water. Water here means liquid that doesn't actively kill you. It comes in a wooden bucket, lightly flavored by old rope and whatever lived in the bucket before you did. If it's winter, the water is also physically solid, like a dessert you didn't order. Sometimes you notice a suspicious sprinkle of bran or rye in the loaf. That's a good day. Other times you notice gravel. Not because the baker was avant-garde, but because quality control got lost somewhere around Moscow. Your molars start drafting their resignation letter. The rations are supposed to keep you marching, but calling this nutrition is like calling a snowstorm a light breeze. It gives you just enough energy to remain conscious so you can continue suffering. It's like your body is on airplane mode. You look around. Everyone else is chewing with the same dead stare. One guy dips his bread in hot water to soften it. It helps slightly, turning the loaf from granite to construction drywall. Another tries to toast his over the evening fire and ends up with a small explosion of crumbs and shame. On rare occasions, special days, miracles, bribes, you might get additional food. Maybe a bit of cabbage, maybe dried fish, maybe, if the universe is feeling extremely generous, gruel. But don't count on it. The bread is your primary, secondary, and tertiary meal. It has the starring role in your dietary trauma. Let us compare this to modern cuisine. Today, We have artisan bakeries with bread so airy and soft it practically hugs your mouth. This Siberian loaf is the opposite. Eating it is like biting into a philosophy lesson about despair. You contemplate if hunger is better. It isn't tea, but the debate is emotional. When the bread is gone, you are still hungry. But at least you've crossed a small emotional hurdle. Tomorrow you'll repeat the ritual, and the day after, and the day after. Eventually, this bread shapes your character. You become resilient. You become determined. Your jaw can now crush gemstones. Sometimes you try to save a bit for later just in case. You tuck it into your coat. Hours later, it is gone. Someone stole it. You glare at everyone in camp like a raccoon whose trash has been disturbed. Who took it? Was it the guy missing 2 fingers? Probably. He looks well fed. Or perhaps it was a wolf. You consider filing a complaint with management, then remember there is no management. Only suffering. At night, you dream of other breads, soft loaves, buttered slices, bread that doesn't double as body armor. You remember the smell of fresh baking, the warmth. Then you wake, clutching your brick, and nibble again. It tastes like surrender. One day, someone jokes that if you buried this bread in the ground, it would sprout into a house. Everyone laughs. Then everyone considers it seriously. Could this bread build shelter? Could it be a weapon, a tool, a friend, all 3? The answer, yes. And that's the thing, this bread isn't just sustenance. It's your hammer, your plate, your doorstop, your emotional support object. It's the only thing the state reliably gives you. It becomes familiar. And in Siberia, familiar is comforting, even when it breaks your teeth. By the end of your exile, you'll be able to chew this bread with dignity. You'll bite it like you were born to do it. Because in Siberia, you don't eat bread, the bread eats you, 1 crumb at a time. After months of walking, you reach a settlement so remote it feels like someone forgot to finish building the map. There's no dramatic gate or welcoming committee, just a cluster of wooden shacks squinting at you from across a wind-beaten plain. The buildings tilt slightly, as if trying to sneak away. This is your new home, a place that looks less town and more unfinished student project. You half expect to see a sticky note saying, BRB will add civilization later. The first thing you notice is the silence. Real silence. Not peaceful silence, ominous silence. The kind that says, even the birds have better places to be. You wait for a dog to bark. Nothing. You wait for a rooster. Nothing. The wind sounds like it's whispering. Turn back. Except you can tee, because a guard with a moustache stands behind you, tapping his spear like a bored metronome. Let's talk climate. The air here is so cold it organizes a protest in your lungs. You breathe in. Your nostrils disagree and try to close permanently. Your eyelashes frost together, forming nature's least convenient blinds. The wind slaps you across the face, letting you know it is the true authority around here, not the Tsar. The settlement has a name, but you don't hear it clearly. Maybe it's Yakut something, or Vostok, or maybe the guard sneezed. Doesn't matter. The world beyond is vast, snowy emptiness. Whatever the name is, it feels temporary, like an alias. Witness Protection Village, population, you. People emerge slowly, curious but cautious. They've seen new arrivals before. Political exiles, common criminals, religious dissenters, and the unfortunate souls who annoyed the wrong bureaucrat. Everyone looks equally cold, equally layered in furs and rags, equally done with life's nonsense. It is comforting in a dismal, bleak support group way. You're escorted to a small wooden hut. Calling it a hut is generous. It's more like a disgruntled log cabin missing its will to live. Wood planks gape open, inviting snowdrifts inside to tour the premises. The door creaks with the same energy you have tired and underpaid. There's a stove inside, or at least something in the general shape of a stove. You will need to feed it consistently if you want to live. It responds by belching smoke like a dragon with allergies. Welcome to Siberia, where your shelter contains both your warmth and your future asthma. Let S talk resources. Water? You have to melt snow. Wood? Chop it. Food? Ha 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 ha. You'll receive rations, but they only count if they arrive. Sometimes locals trade fish or meat if the hunt has been good. Other times you nibble regret and call it dinner. You suddenly remember how picky you used to be about vegetables. You were a fool. The settlement is arranged around a dirt path that becomes a mud path in summer and an icy slip and die in winter. The buildings huddle close together for warmth, like penguins. If penguins were constantly worried about freezing to death or being reassigned to a mine, what do you do now? First, orientation. A guard recites rules. You hear work, don't escape, and if wolves eat you, that's on you. You nod, you pretend to understand. Mostly you're trying not to collapse. The other exiles shuffle toward you. One man, older and wrapped in so many layers he looks like a bundle of walking laundry, gives you a nod that loosely translates to, "Sorry about your life." Someone hands you a wooden spoon, a gesture both practical and depressing. This is your silverware now. This is your heirloom. Even though the Tsars established these settlements as punishments, they doubled as colonization projects. You are now an unwilling pioneer. Congrats. You get neither land ownership nor a sense of purpose. You get chores. Siberia, as great project, is extracting labor from people who have questionable skills and even less motivation. The settlement has a few specialty buildings, maybe a small chapel, maybe a workshop. They are modest, leaning, and frequently patched. The workshop smells like wood, wool, sweat, and tears. Here, men repair tools and make small items that might be traded. If you're lucky and have a skill, you might end up here. If you're unlucky, you go to the mine. Night falls early, the sky turns purple-black, and the world becomes quiet again. No carriages, no city bustle, just wind, wolves, and your own thoughts, roasting slowly like chestnuts in existential dread. The stars are brilliant, though so bright it's like someone installed 4K lighting. You've never seen the sky this full. It's beautiful enough to hurt. Inside your hut, you test the bed. It is a wooden plank with straw that smells like last year's goat. You lie down, bundling your coat around you. The cold seeps in through every crack, determined to cuddle. You try to think of home-warm rooms, family voices, bread that didn't inflict dental harm. You think of letters you'll write but which may never arrive. Morning arrives with no ceremony, just light. You wake up and remember, this isn't a dream. Siberia is real, and you live here now. The strangest feeling settles over you. Not despair, not fear, but numb practicality. You survived the first night. You got this far. You can chop wood. You can eat rocks disguised as bread. You can listen to wind scold you daily. Maybe, just maybe, you'll make it. In this nowhere, existence is less about thriving and more about enduring. But under layers of snow and regret, there's a heartbeat, small, stubborn, human, and that is enough to get up for another day. Your new home is a wooden shack insulated with dirt, rags, and questionable hope. The hut sits crookedly, like it's trying to lean away from the wind but does not have the energy to commit. From the outside, it looks like someone attempted to assemble a log cabin, using only vague childhood memories and a butter knife. The planks don't quite line up, leaving tiny gaps where breezes and regrets slide through. The roof is present, mostly. It's made of overlapping birch, bark, sod, and prayer. You push the door open. It resists. Not because of fancy locks, but because it's as swollen with dampness and disappointment. Once inside, you take stock. It is about the size of a modest walk-in closet if the closet were built by a carpenter who had never heard of straight lines. There's a table made of slightly stubbier tree parts, a stool that wobbles like a tipsy goat, and a straw mattress that feels like napping on a bundle of uncooked spaghetti. The stove, the pride of the room, looks like someone rolled up a pile of bricks and declared it good enough. It has one mission: keep you alive. In return, you must feed it wood, affection, and constant reassurance. When it is working, it belches warmth and soot in equal measure. When it is not working, it is simply a cold, judgmental pile of bricks that demands more wood, as if wood just grows on trees. It does. Unfortunately, cutting them down is now your new gym routine. Let's talk insulation. Modern people insulate homes with fiberglass, foam, or science. Here, insulation is whatever you can shove into cracks. Mud, moss, scraps of fur, old shirts. You become deeply invested in plugging holes like you're trying to stop emotional leaks. Every patch is a tiny victory. Take that, wind. Not today. The floor is packed dirt mixed with straw. No hardwood, no tiles, just earth doing its best. In winter, it gets so cold your toes attempt to burrow to safety. In spring, it gets muddy. In summer, it smells like mildew and ancient soup. You sweep it occasionally with a bundle of twigs, accomplishing nothing except moving dust from one emotional location to another. You share this space maybe with family, maybe with strangers, maybe with a rooster who just lives here now. Privacy disappears. Everyone sleeps side by side, wrapped in furs that shed like emotional baggage. When someone rolls over, you feel it. When someone snores, you hear it. When someone dreams loudly, you question your life choices. The windows, if you can call them, that are tiny glassless openings covered with oiled paper or animal bladder. They let in a dim, yellowish light that makes everything look like an early iPhone photo. On stormy days, they rattle. On colder nights, you stuff rags into them until they stop reminding you that winter is your closest neighbor. You hang your precious belongings, all three of them, on pegs hammered into the wall. A spoon, a scarf, a piece of bread so ancient it's become decorative. This is your decor. You consider rearranging it to refresh the space, then remember you have work tomorrow and collapse instead. When the stove is lit, the hut fills with heat and smoke. You cough. Your eyes water. Someone insists this is normal and good for the lungs, which is a bold claim from a man who coughs like a haunted accordion. Still, the warmth is worth it. Without that stove, you would freeze faster than leftovers in November. Night is when the hut's character really shines. The shadows stretch across the walls like sleepy ghosts. You curl up under a pile of furs, straw, and existential dread. The wind howls outside, testing the seams, trying to join the sleepover. The door rattles. You whisper, "No," and place a chair against it, not because it will stop anything, but because it makes you feel better. Sometimes you hear wolves. Sometimes you hear the creak of settling logs. Sometimes you hear your neighbor murmuring in their sleep about cabbage. You try to drift off. The warmth of the stove is cozy, the atmosphere strangely intimate. You've never felt farther from the world, yet so close to the people around you. In summer, things improve, slightly. The breeze becomes tolerable. You can open the door without your soul shattering. Flowers even grow outside, little pops of color reminding you that life still happens. You might sweep the floor out of pure optimism. Then, the mosquitoes come. They enter through the cracks with the enthusiasm of wedding guests at an open bar. They bite. They hum, you slap, no one sleeps. And yet the hut, with its drafty walls and stubborn stove, becomes familiar. You learn its creaks. You know exactly where to step to avoid bumping your nose on the rafters. You know how to place wood so the stove catches at just the right angle. You even begin to feel, dare you say, fondness for it. Because the hut may be crooked, cold, and constantly threatening to collapse like your emotional stability, but it's yours. And in Siberia, having a roof, no matter how flimsy, makes you remarkably fortunate. Home is where the frost is, or at least where it bothers you slightly less. Siberia's winters dip below 40, a temperature at which water freezes, spirits crumble, and your internal organs start drafting resignation letters. At 40T, everything hurts. Air hurts. Looking at things hurts. Thinking about Florida hurts. The cold is not an inconvenience, it's a full-time personality that hates you. You've never truly been cold until you've been Siberia cold. There's really cold. And then there's your eyelashes are now icicles cold. The moment winter begins, time slows down. Days blend into nights, and nights stretch on forever. The sun lurks just below the horizon like it is avoiding eye contact. The sky is that pale blue-grey that makes you think your vision is broken. Snow covers everything, buildings, trees, your hopes, your former fashion sense. And what looks soft and fluffy is actually jagged, crunchy ice powder that wants you to fall and lose a tooth. You step outside your hut and the wind greets you like a slap from a giant frosty hand. It slides through your layers of clothing directly onto your soul, like, "Hi, I'm your new roommate." Your nose hairs freeze. This is a real thing, inside your nostrils. Tiny stalactites form. You sneeze, and somewhere a snow fairy dies. Let us talk clothing. You are layered like an onion wearing another onion. Wool shirt, wool coat, something that might be a scarf, plus a questionable animal hide that smells like it once had opinions. Despite all this, you're still cold. You walk around stuffed like a burrito, but instead of tasty fillings, it's just fear and rags. Your hands go numb instantly, and you spend the next several hours wondering if fingers are optional. Work continues, of course. Siberia does not do snow days. Chop wood, haul logs, mine ore. Everything takes 10 times longer because your tools are frosty and your joints have frozen into rusted hinges. You swing your axe, miss the log, and hit your foot. You don't feel it. Is that good news? Debatable. The cold changes you. You start talking to inanimate objects, your shovel, your boots, the small chunk of bread hugging your pocket. You beg them to be warm, to be kind, to show mercy. They do not care. Everything here is cold and indifferent, including your shovel, which seems personally offended that you exist. Inside the hut, the stove roars. You huddle around it like it's a minor deity. Fire is your new religion. People worship it daily with offerings of wood and whispered praise. When the fire dies down, panic sets in. You scramble for more wood, toss in random burnable objects, sticks, branches, emotional baggage. Night is the real enemy. Temperatures plummet. You pile on every scrap of fur you own, plus things you stole from your neighbor who was too asleep to defend himself. Your breath fogs so thick you could probably sculpt an ice swan out of it. You sleep curled into a ball, wondering if this is how a baby seal feels. You envy baby seals. They at least have each other. Sometimes you dream of warmth, summer breezes, sandy beaches. But one time you complained about being too hot. You are such an idiot. If you could go back, you'd give past you a firm slap with a mitten. Let S talk food. It S hot, occasionally. You eat soup made of water, carrots, and metaphysical suffering. You sip it slowly, letting the warmth spread through your frozen body like a temporary miracle. Then it's gone, and you return to being a sentient ice cube. Travel is limited. Roads vanish under piles of snow, and landmarks become vague, snow-covered lumps. You might walk straight into a frozen pond because it looked like solid ground. You might lose your hat to a gust of wind and consider chasing it. Then remember, hypothermia exists and wave goodbye. You learn tricks. Don't lick metal. Don't breathe too fast or your lungs will stage a coup. Keep moving. If you stop, you become a human popsicle. You also learn that faces are overrated. Nobody recognizes anyone under 7 layers of clothing anyway. You greet neighbors like, "Hey fur blob, is that you even?" Occasionally the sky clears. The stars emerge in crystalline brilliance, so bright they feel closer. It is breathtaking until you realize you've been staring too long and your eyeballs are freezing. You rush back inside, humbled. Winter can last 7 months. 7 months of cold that makes your bones. 7 months of frost forming on your beard like avant-garde sculpture. 7 months of walking outside and thinking, why am I like this? And yet somehow you adapt. Your hands learn the art of working while numb. Your feet become calloused against the cold. Your mind adjusts to a world where warmth is temporary and survival is the main hobby. You learn to appreciate the stove's small glow, the rare moments when your tea is still hot, the luxury of socks that don't actively attack your feet. Siberia teaches you flexibility mostly because if you don't bend, you will break. It teaches you humility, patience, and that your body can produce more snot than you ever imagined. Winter in Siberia is not just weather, it's a lifestyle, a personality trait, a roommate that overstays its welcome but you can evict. And every spring, when the ice melts just enough for mud to bloom, you shake out your fur layers, stretch your numb fingers and think, wow, that wasn't so bad. Then winter returns 3 days later, and you reconsider every thought you've ever had. You wake up, you cough, you wonder if toes are optional. They might be, honestly. You wiggle them experimentally in the cramped darkness. 1 moves, 2 move. The others are staging a mutiny. It's fine. You whisper promises of warmer days. They do not believe you. Morning begins when the stove stops pretending to be warm. The embers fade, the hut cools, and the air transforms into a refreshing Arctic shock. You open your eyes to see your breath floating above you, like your soul trying to leave quietly. You inhale, your lungs lodge a formal complaint. You cough again. Around you, other bodies stir. Family, fellow exiles, a random guy who sleeps near your toes because that S where the heat once was. You all look roughly the same hair sticking out at odd angles, eyes half open, layered in fur, regret, and last night's smoke. The hut smells like wood ash, damp wool, and that one guy who refuses to admit he snores. Before anything else, you must face the decision. Do you get out of bed? Or do you remain here, curled like a furry criminal pastry, pretending reality doesn't exist? The answer is yes, you get up. Not because you want to, but because the guards will yell, and yelling is worse than hypothermia. You crawl from under your furs. The cold slaps you immediately, like it's been waiting all night just to ruin your confidence. Your first task, find your boots. They look identical to everyone else's boots, which means there is a 50 chance you will accidentally wear someone else's. It doesn't matter. All boots are bad. You shove them on your feet and hope for the best. The bathroom situation is simple. There isn't one. You step outside, into the morning air described scientifically as "don't to breathe too deeply," or you'll freeze your alveoli solid. The snow crunches underfoot. You shuffle away from the hut, trying not to trip over the chain, still hugging your ankle like an overattached pet. You handle business behind a bush that looks as miserable as you feel. Back inside, you approach the stove again. Someone must bring it back to life. You poke its ashes with a stick, whisper a prayer, and refeed it with scrap wood you chopped yesterday with the enthusiasm of a depressed lumberjack. If it catches, it will cough out warmth and smoke like a grumpy old uncle. If it doesn't, you try again, and again, and again. Maintaining fire is your entire personality now. Let us talk breakfast. Surprise, it is the same bread you met last night. The brick, the culinary enemy. You gnaw at it in silence, chewing slowly, praying your teeth don't file for divorce. Maybe you dip it in hot water, maybe you stare at it angrily. Either way, it is your breakfast. Savor its chewy nihilism. Occasionally someone brews tea hot water with hopes mixed in. It has no flavor, but it's warm. You cradle the wooden cup with reverence, as if holding it will magically fix your spine. The steam fogs your eyelashes briefly before crystallizing. Delicious. Your morning routine also includes checking your extremities. Fingers, still here. Ears, possibly. Nose, frozen but attached. Toes, unclear. As long as nothing has turned a suspicious shade of violet, you're winning. A man across the hut shows off his frostbitten pinky like it's a war medal. You nod politely, then quietly pray that yours remain fleshy. Conversation is minimal in the morning. No one is awake enough to be emotionally available. Someone mutters about wolves they heard overnight. Someone else swears the stove laughed at them. You glance at the stove. It offers no comment. Yet. Then comes dressing. Technically, you slept in your clothes, but now you must add more layers. Shirt. Another shirt. Coat. Cloak. Something furry. Something vaguely rodent-shaped. You layer until you feel like an overfilled pillowcase. Good. Now you can face the outdoors. You step outside for real, greeted by a sunrise that looks like a grayscale watercolor. The sky blushes pale pink, then remembers it's Siberia and fades to gray. You breathe in. The cold enters your bones, sits down, and starts redecorating. Work time, says a guard, voice cheerful only when threatening. You trudge to your assignment, logging, mining, hauling feet stiff, legs aching, jaw still processing the bread brick. The morning routine ends when you start working, which is to say, the end is the beginning of a new cycle of discomfort. On the way, you greet other exiles with the universal Siberian nod. I am cold, you are cold, we exist. A man jokes that at least today it is not windy so naturally. The wind picks up instantly, proving nature has impeccable comedic timing. If you're lucky, there's a moment before heavy labor when you simply stand still and listen. Snow drifts, crows caw, somewhere, a distant axe thumps. Your breath fogs in slow circles. It is strangely peaceful, in a bleak, emotional support void kind of way. Against your better judgment you think, this isn't so bad. Then the wind slaps your face again, and you remember Siberia is never not trying to kill you. And so the morning routine concludes. You wake up. You cough. You wonder if toes are optional. You face the cold. And somehow you endure. Because that is what mornings are here. A daily reminder that if you've survived the night, you can survive the day. Congratulations, you're now a lumberjack. Not a plaid-clad, lumber-sexual Instagram lumberjack, no. You're an exhausted, cold, underfed tree assassin who gets absolutely nothing in return except splinters and rage. Siberian forests stretch on for thousands of miles, dark, ominous, and full of trees that look like they're judging you. They are tall, stubborn, and smugly aware that you will never chop all of them down. Your new workplace is not climate-controlled. In fact, it's climate-aggressive. Snow falls sideways. Wind attempts to remove your face. Your hands still recovering from the morning routine grip an axe that feels both too heavy and not heavy enough. It's made of metal and hope, and you're pretty sure at least one of those things is deteriorating. Before you begin, a guard gestures at a forest and says something that translates to, "Go forth, break yourself." You nod because that's all you do now. You march into the tree line, boots crunching through snow that somehow manages to be both soft and painfully sharp. Your job is simple. Chop trees, drag them back. Chop more trees, Dante die. Think of it like CrossFit, except you pay with your sanity instead of money. You pick a tree usually chosen for you by the guard who enjoys watching you suffer and begin hacking. The first swing feels powerful, heroic even. You think, I could get used to this. The second swing is less impressive. By the third, your arms burn. By the 10th, you are wheezing. The tree barely notices. Its bark mocks you. "Nice try," it whispers, as your axe rebounds into your shins. Good times. Eventually, after many swings and several near-death experiences, the tree begins to give. It creaks, groans, and finally falls, hitting the ground with a dramatic thud. You expect applause, a medal, maybe hot cocoa. Instead, someone says, "Good. Now do 50 more." Dragging the tree back to camp is your next trial. There are no sleds, no pulleys, no forklifts. It is just you, a rope, and physics. You lean forward with every muscle engaged, sliding the log inch by inch through snow that behaves like sticky mashed potatoes. The wind cheers you on by trying to push you backward. Eventually, you consider naming the tree because now you've bonded through trauma. This job is dangerous. Axes slip, branches whip, trees fall in unpredictable directions, usually toward you. A fellow exile loses a chunk of coat to a falling branch. Another loses a chunk of pride, tripping over a stump. You vow to never sit near that stump again. It has seen too much. Let's talk safety equipment. There isn't any. Your gloves are thin, your boots are tired. Your hat is a suggestion. Splinters wedge themselves into your fingers like tiny wooden insults. You pull them out with your teeth and keep swinging. OSHA would have an aneurysm. And yet, logging becomes routine. There's a rhythm. Swing, breathe, swing, curse, swing. Question everything. You find a pace. You learn to aim your blows more effectively. You develop muscle you can to see it under the 12 layers of clothing, but it is there, plotting to one day look impressive. Sometimes you work alongside local Siberian hunters or reindeer herders who chop wood the way you breathe. They crush a tree in 3 swings. You watch in awe, trying not to cry. They shrug and say something encouraging like, "You'll get there," which is nice, even though you know you won tea. During breaks, you huddle around a tiny fire. You share bread. Someone roasts a sliver of fish and pretends it's a feast. You warm your hands, your face, your frozen nose. Then you get back to work because breaks are brief, and the forest is endless. Logging also teaches you about teamwork. Chains of men drag logs together, grunting in miserable harmony. You learn to coordinate 1, 2, pull like synchronized swimmers who hate everything. You bond over splinters and shared suffering. These are your co-workers, your gym buddies, your emotional support lumberjacks. At sunset, if you can see it through the trees you're told to stop, you look at the day's pile of logs. It's respectable. Maybe not enough to impress your guard, but enough to feel like you existed today. Then you're handed another rope to drag more logs to the settlement. Apparently the day isn't tea over. Of course not. By the time you return to your hut, your muscles have liquefied. Your arms feel like they belong to someone else. You drop onto your straw bed, still vibrating from the day's effort. Your hands smell like sap. Sap that does not come off no matter what. You consider chopping the stove for warmth. You decide against it. Barely. The funny thing is, after weeks of this, you get stronger. Your swings become sharper. Your body adjusts. The work is still miserable, but now you can do it without crying. Out loud anyway. Logging becomes your new normal, a lifestyle, a job that gives no benefits, no vacation days, and no dental, yet somehow becomes the backbone of your survival. Because in Siberia, if you don't chop wood, you don't have heat. If you don't have heat, you die. Simple math. So yes, congratulations, you're a lumberjack. Siberia S original gym membership. No sign-up fee. You just lose a little dignity every day. Underground, you chip away at metal ore while questioning every life choice that led you here. Mining in Siberia is not what you imagined. There are no lantern-lit songs about dwarves, no magical glowing gems, no friendly mole people offering cookies. No, this is a hole in the ground where cheer goes to suffocate. It is cold, but also somehow sweaty. Dark, but also blinding when your torch sputters weirdly. Cramped, but also vast enough to lose your sanity in. You descend into the mine, ducking under beams that look like they were installed by someone who hated math and the concept of straight. The air is thick. Dust hangs like a gloomy mist ready to coat your lungs with the mineral equivalent of sadness. You breathe shallowly, and even that is too much. Your coughing echoes down the tunnels like a small, unhappy ghost. There is no ventilation here. There is only make-do and don to faint. You envy fainting, honestly. It seems restful. Your tools are basic. A hammer, a chisel, and an eternal sense of dread. The rock face stares you down, unmoved. You raise your hammer, swing, and produce a sound that could double as high-pitched whining. A few microscopic rock crumbs fall. You feel accomplished for half a second. Then the guard tells you to hurry up or he'll turn you into a permanent mine installation. Swing, crack, swing, crack. The rhythm isn't graceful, it is resentful. The ore glints occasionally, tricking you into thinking it's as gold. It is not. It is probably iron or copper. Nothing glamorous. Siberia does not give you treasure. It gives you toenail-shaped minerals that will be hauled away by somebody who definitely won't thank you. But still, you work. Because not working means punishment. And punishment here means things like less food or extra work or digging a hole with your bare hands. You chip away hour after hour, listening to the echo of tools and the quiet regret of your co-workers. Some men mutter prayers. Others hum tunes they barely remember. One guy whistles constantly, and you consider lodging a formal complaint with the wolves. Speaking of co-workers, mining is communal misery. You squeeze into narrow tunnels with fellow exiles, each of you covered in dust until you all look like budget statues. You don't talk much. Oxygen is limited, and conversation is reserved for important things like, is that tunnel collapsing? Or did you hear that? When you do talk, it is usually gallows humour. If the roof falls, at least we won't have to walk home tonight, someone jokes. You laugh, then wonder if that's foreshadowing. Let's discuss danger. Mining is risky at the best of times, and this is not the best of times. The tunnels groan ominously. Beams shift. Rocks crumble. Your torch might go out without warning, leaving you in pure darkness, no stars, no glow, nothing. You can tell where the walls end or where the floor begins. You reach out with trembling fingers and pray no rat answers your greeting. Sometimes the mines flood. Melting snow seeps through cracks, filling tunnels with icy water that rises faster than your ability to swear. You wade through, teeth chattering, clutching your tools. Your boots slosh, your pants freeze, and yet work continues. Stopping is for vacations which you will never have. On good days, you get to the surface before your soul leaves your body. You stumble out, blinking under the pale Siberian light, gasping like you've been reborn. The air feels cleaner, still cold as tax season, but breathable. You dust yourself off, which is hilarious, because the dust will never leave. It lives on you now like an unwanted tattoo. Lunch is a blessing, a small ration of bread and maybe fish if the universe is feeling whimsical. You sit on a log or a rock, shovel food into your mouth and stare into the distance. Everything aches. Your arms feel like they've fought a horse. Your back is permanently shaped like a parenthesis. Someone jokes that at least the ore is shiny. No one laughs. It's not that funny. After lunch, you go back in. Because the mine is jealous, it demands attention constantly. You light your torch again. The flame flickers. You descend. You resume your rhythmic life. Swing, chip, regret, repeat. Time loses meaning. Was it an hour? A week? Who knows? The only clock here is exhaustion. Occasionally, some exiles are assigned specialized tasks. Drilling with crude tools, hauling ore carts, or reinforcing beams. If you're strong, you drag carts. If you're skilled, you reinforce beams so tunnels don't crush people. If you are neither strong nor skilled, you do both and pray. Night finally arrives, or so they tell you. Darkness underground looks exactly like darkness above. You return to the surface, muscles limp, brain fogged. You trek back to your hut, feeling the leftover hum of the mine in your bones. Your skin is dusty. Your hair is dusty. Your soul is dusty. Inside, you sit by the stove, staring blankly as the fire crackles. Someone asks how your day was. You say, "It was mining." They nod. They understand. Everyone understands. And when you crawl into bed, your dreams are not of freedom or sunshine, just the sound of swinging tools, the echo of falling rocks, and the metallic glint of shiny ore that never belonged to you. Then morning comes and you do it all again. Because in Siberia, mining isn't just a job, it is a long-term relationship with despair. You wrap yourself in whatever you can find, furs, scraps, optimism. Nothing matches, but no one is judging. Welcome to Siberian couture, where the biggest trend is dentifrice to death, and the only dress code is layers, all of them. Think of your wardrobe as a chaotic closet that exploded, but instead of declaring bankruptcy and starting fresh at Target, you just wear the explosion. There's no winter collection here. There's just stuff that was lying around. Your outfit begins with a base layer. A shirt made from coarse linen that feels like it was woven by a disgruntled goat. Over that, you add a second shirt wool, scratchy, communicative. It whispers complaints in your ears every time you move. Then comes the fur. It might be fox, maybe rabbit, perhaps something no one can identify anymore. You don't ask questions. If it is warm, it is stylish. Everything comes in earthy tones. Brown, brownish, mud, snow-dusted mud. It is a palette best described as natural survival grime. But no one cares. Siberia killed vanity long ago. A nobleman might be wearing the same ratty fur coat as a peasant. Ironically, this is the most egalitarian fashion has ever been. Scarves are essential if not for warmth, then for emotional support. You wrap one around your neck, then another around your face. They are patched, mismatched, and smell like a forest had a panic attack. When the wind blows, you feel grateful for every piece of textile gluing itself to your body. Gloves are more of a concept than a garment. You might have a pair, but they were fingerless and full of holes. You consider sewing new ones, but needles are rare, thread is rarer, and motivation is extinct. So you wrap your hands in strips of cloth until you resemble a budget mummy with emotional issues. Your boots where to begin. They are technically boots, in the same way a cardboard box is technically a house. leather patched with rawhide and hope, soaked in coldness. Inside, you stuff straw, not because it's comfortable spoiler. It's not, but because it keeps your toes from becoming seasonal decor. The straw sheds constantly, leaving little trails like you're a lost barn animal. Then there are the hats. Headwear is non-negotiable, and Siberian fashion offers many options. Fur hats, wool caps, or hybrid inventions held together by vibes. They're all lumpy and vaguely menacing. One person proudly flaunts a hat that looks like it was made from 3 different animals and a bad dream. You admire it, slightly terrified. Every layer adds weight until you feel like a walking, talking laundry pile. Movement becomes clumsy. You bend your arm and hear something crack, not bone. Just a frozen seam giving up. You tell yourself that it's fine. It builds character. Literally, your outfit has so much personality it may apply for its own passport. Washing clothes is a myth. Water is frozen. Soap is precious. And warmth is non-existent. If your outfit starts to smell like damp bear, you hang it near the stove and call it refreshed. The smoke aroma fights the musk. No one wins, but everyone smells the same, so it's a communal act of olfactory surrender. You develop creative layering hacks, stuffing moss into boots for cushioning, wrapping a scarf around your midsection to stop the wind from yeeting your soul, using spare rope as a belt, wearing 2 hats on especially cold days, and pretending you're a fashion pioneer. In Siberia, function beats form every time. Sometimes you see locals who've perfected the look. They move easily, swaddled in expertly sewn furs. Their coats have reinforced seams. They look like cozy woodland deities. You stare in admiration. They stare back, wondering why the new exile looks like a startled snow raccoon. Modern comparison. Think of dressing for a Chicago winter. Now remove North Face, heat tech, zippers, and dignity. Replace them with damp wool, questionable pelts, and a consistent sense of personal betrayal. That is Siberian layering. Underneath the chaos, clothing becomes symbolic. Layers represent resilience. The more you wear, the more you signal, yes, I value my survival. Stripping down is not sexy. It is stupid. You don't want to be the guy who froze because he wanted to feel the breeze. Kids get miniature versions of your outfit, tiny bundles waddling through the snow like confused dumplings. You often see babies wrapped in furs and slung cross backs, peeking out like sentient pockets. They blink slowly, unimpressed by the cold. You suspect they were born slightly frozen already. Your outfit evolves with the seasons. In summer, you remove maybe 1 layer. Winter returns before you can celebrate. You put it back on, sighing deeply. Clothing is a once-a-year event. You don't change outfits. Outfits change you. Occasionally, very rarely, someone acquires a brightly coloured sash or patterned cloth. It becomes a local celebrity. People gasp. They ask where it came from. The wearer shrugs. Trade. You touch it reverently, like Fabergé lace, even though it's probably just a scrap from someone else's old curtains. At the end of every day, you peel off your outer garments, layer by crusty layer, until you reach your inner clothes, which are only mildly horrifying. You fold everything carefully, because tomorrow you'll need it again, and again, and again. And over time, this mismatched bundle of fabric and fur becomes comforting, protective, familiar. It's not pretty. It doesn't need to be. It keeps you alive, that's all that matters. In Siberia, fashion doesn't ask, "Do you look good?" It asks, "Are you still breathing?" If yes, congratulations, you're flawlessly on trend. On a good day, you eat porridge. On a bad day, you eat nothing. On a great day, you bribe someone for fish. There is no food culture here, only food survival. You don't talk about texture, acidity, or notes of oak. You talk about Did this meal keep me alive? That's it. Siberian exile transforms you into a culinary minimalist. If it's warm and vaguely edible, Michelin who? Your typical day's menu begins with porridge, if you can call it that. Think of oatmeal, but less creamy, less flavorful, and more existential. It's mostly water, plus a few grains who regretted showing up. The consistency varies from thin despair soup to wood glue. You eat it slowly, savouring the warmth seeping into your bones. The flavour? Grey, sometimes wet grey. Bowl distribution is a system of chaos and hope. A pot sits over the stove, bubbling like it is threatening to unionize. A designated ladler, usually whoever lost a bet, doles out portions. They aim for fairness, but fairness is subjective, and you swear the guy before you got 3 more globs of grain. You say nothing because complaining burns calories you can replace. Lunch is a surprise. The surprise is that you're eating again. Usually it is more bread, the emotional vampire of food, paired with something you can technically call soup. Soup is water with creative ambition. It might have onions, it might not. It will definitely have sadness. You slurp it gratefully. On rare days, excitement erupts. Someone produced fish. This fish was either caught by an exile who braved the frozen river or acquired through economics. Economics, in this case, is trading a handmade spoon and possibly your warmest socks to a local who found fish lurking under a sheet of ice. This fish becomes a communal event. Everyone gathers around as it is tossed into a pot, bones and all. Flavour seeps out like weak encouragement. Then there are the bad days. The pot is empty. The bread didn't arrive. A storm kept hunters from hunting. You eat nothing. Your stomach growls so loudly you worry a wolf might interpret it as trash talk. You swallow snow for hydration and pretend you are doing a cleanse. Trendy, right? Let's talk meat. Meat is theoretical. Sometimes locals have reindeer. You smell it, salivate, and dream of stealing a piece. You don't eat because the locals have sharp tools and better reflexes. When meat does appear, it's usually something stringy. You chew and chew and chew. At some point you wonder if you're eating jerky or leather. You don't stop to find out. Flavours here are subtle. The porridge tastes like nothing. The soup tastes like diluted nothing. The fish, if present, tastes like Arctic. Salt is a luxury. Spices are a myth. The only spice you know is smoke, and that arrives naturally from your stove, your clothes, and your personality. Etiquette is minimal. You sit wherever there's room on a stool, a log, or the floor, knees pulled up for insulation. You eat from a wooden bowl carved by someone who probably should have been a carpenter, but was too busy surviving. Spoons are shared, washed with snow and faith. If you don't get a spoon, you drink straight from the bowl like a lonely dog. No judgment. The dining atmosphere is quiet. No one talks much. Talking wastes heat. Everyone hunches over their bowl, warming their hands, staring into the void of porridge as if hoping it might reveal life secrets like how to escape or how to make it taste better. It never does. Occasionally there is variety. Someone found berries. They are tiny, tart, and probably fought you back. You eat them anyway because vitamins are a thing. Someone else found mushrooms. You hope they're not the sort that kills. You eat them anyway because starvation is faster. You learn techniques. The bread brick can be softened by soaking it in soup. It becomes edible at the cost of structural integrity and joy. Sometimes you mix porridge with soup to create a fusion dish called still bad. You pretend you're a chef on a reality show. Today, I am preparing warm goo a la survival, garnished with hope. The judges, your fellow exiles, approve with solemn nods. Trading becomes essential. You barter tools, clothing scraps, a story, a song, anything for a bite of fish or a handful of flour. You become a negotiator, a diplomat of hunger. I'll fix your fence if you give me half your potato. Done. Potatoes are basically diamonds. Fish days are holidays. Everyone hovers. The pot steams. The smell, actual smell, teases your nose. You wait your turn, bowl in hand, reverent. The first bite is astonishing. Actual protein, flavour, sensation. You close your eyes. You ascend. Then it's gone, and you return to porridge reality. Sometimes villagers or guards sell extras berries, herbs, bits of smoked meat. Prices are absurd, but hunger is a powerful motivator. You trade away half your earthly possessions. You never regret it. At night, dinner is leftovers, usually porridge, sometimes cold. You reheat it if you have energy. If not, you simply accept your fate. The starch clings to your spoon like a needy friend. You eat it anyway, because it's fuel. Then you lie down, stomach humming, dreaming of feasts you'll never have. Food in Siberia isn't about pleasure, it's about existence. You don't eat to live, you live because you eat just barely. Each meal is a small reminder that you're still here, still fighting, still hungry. Dining with the void isn't a fun, but it is consistent. And in this wasteland, consistency is almost comfort. Tomorrow porridge again. Lucky you. Sometimes friendly Siberian locals help you survive. You trade skills or objects for food and advice like "Don't lick metal," which frankly you've already learned the hard way. These locals, indigenous Siberian groups, old believers, runaway serfs, or simply people who made questionable real estate decisions centuries ago, know the land better than anyone. They've lived here long enough to understand when the river ice is too thin, when the wolves are feeling spicy, and which mushrooms are fun versus fatal. You cling to their wisdom like a toddler clings to a stuffed animal during a thunderstorm. Your first trading session happens awkwardly. You step into the settlement's informal marketplace, a cluster of huts and half-frozen humans, trying to look casual while eyeing each other as belongings. You brought what you have, a spoon you carved, some worn mittens, maybe a small icon or a scrap of cloth. You present these treasures with a desperate smile. The locals inspect your goods like antique appraisers evaluating questionable artifacts. Finally, one offers a small fish in return. Victory. You eat like a king, a deeply underprivileged king, but still. Trading is simple. You want food, clothing, or information. They want whatever they can get: tools, labor, music, gossip, you name it. If you can sing, you sing. If you can sew, you patch coats. If you can do nothing, you attempt flattery. Wow, love your hat, very furry. You hope this works. It usually doesn't, but you try. Sometimes you trade services. If you're handy, a family might ask you to help repair their shed because apparently ear-splitting wind is not considered a safe interior design. In return, they might give you potatoes, or a strange dried fish, or, most precious of all, tea leaves. You cradle the tea like it's illegal contraband. You brew it with ceremony, inhaling the aroma of almost flavor. Locals teach you survival tricks, how to set snares for rabbits, how to mend boots with sinew, how to store food in a hole without attracting wolves. You listen carefully, taking mental notes while shivering violently. They show you plants that are edible, ones that are medicinal, and ones that are decorative poison. "That one kills," someone says casually. You nod and avoid it like your taxes. In winter, you might help with reindeer herding. Reindeer are majestic until you try to lead them. Then you realize they're just large, stubborn snow cows with opinions. Locals laugh as you chase one in circles, fur coat flapping like a defective cape. Eventually you learn to guide them. In return you get meat, milk, or a story about how reindeer once saved someone's life. You silently thank the reindeer. Also, you apologize for calling them snow cows. Fishing is another shared craft. Locals cut holes in frozen rivers and wait. You join them, sitting silently, praying the ice wanna to crack. Your toes lose sensation, your patience dissolves. Then miracle a fish bites. You cheer. The locals nod, approvingly, as if saying, maybe you want to die. You trade the fish for firewood because you value warmth more than protein. It is a good trade. Conversations are brief. Language barriers mix with frostbite to create minimal dialogue. You point. They nod. You nod. Everyone nods. And somehow agreements happen. Occasionally you catch phrases, warnings about storms, rumours about bears, gossip about the exile who tried to escape and got lost immediately. It is like village Twitter, but with fewer conspiracy theories and more practical advice, like Don T sleep next to the outer wall. The wind there hates you personally. During holidays, the locals sometimes share food. A festival might appear out of nowhere, music, dancing, everyone dressed in their least disintegrating clothes. You're invited to eat dumplings or stewed meat. You nearly cry, it's so good your taste buds resign from their protest. For a moment, you feel like a human again. But trading is not always warm and fuzzy. Some locals exploit desperation. They ask high prices for basic goods. You trade a fur coat for a bundle of carrots and question your life decisions. Still, carrots are carrots. You need them. Scurvy looms like a creepy uncle. Some exiles become close with local families, working for them regularly. They share stories by the fire, laugh awkwardly, and learn each other as strange idioms. You find comfort in these bonds. They remind you that life isn't the only punishment, it can also be connection, even in the frozen edges of nowhere. The most valuable trade of all, information. Locals know the land intimately. They tell you which rivers freeze last, which forests have bears with vendettas, and which routes lead nowhere except deeper into despair. You listen, storing knowledge like treasure, because one day, who knows, you might need it. Some locals are descended from earlier exiles. Their grandparents arrived in chains. Now they are Siberian veterans with impressive winter outfits and zero desire to return west. They tell you stories of how they adapted, how they built homes, grew food, raised kids, and made peace with the cold. Their resilience is humbling. You realize that, against all odds, life can continue here, not happily, necessarily, but with grit. Trading day ends at dusk. You trudge home, arms full of whatever you acquired, maybe a fish, some flour, a bundle of herbs. Your breath fogs the air. Your fingers thaw over the stove. You examine your spoils. Not much by modern standards, but enough to survive another week. That's what trading gives you the chance to keep going. In Siberia, trade is more than barter. It is community. It is truce. It is proof that even at the end of the earth, people can still help one another. It is a reminder that survival is rarely solo. You came to trade objects. You ended up trading humanity. And that, somehow, keeps you alive. Staying warm becomes a spiritual practice. You huddle near the stove, stuff rags in gaps, and consider fire your closest. Friend closer than family, closer than God, closer than that one neighbour who snores like a dying walrus. Fire isn't just a tool, it is a lifestyle. It is the emotional support animal of Siberia, except it can actually kill you if you're careless. Your relationship with fire is complicated, but like all good relationships, it's forged out of mutual need and a little fear. The first commandment of Siberian survival: thou shalt feed the stove. The stove, not the guard, not your supervisor, not even your own ego is the true authority. When the stove is pleased, it burns brightly. filling your hut with heat and the comforting scent of partially singed salvation. When it is displeased, it sulks, coughing up smoke and passive-aggressively refusing to ignite. Your day revolves around that stove. You wake, check on it. You return from logging, check on it. Before bed, you make sure it's fed and tucked in with affection, and by affection, we mean several logs, carefully arranged like flammable Tetris. You whisper encouragement. "Come on, buddy, we got this." A spark answers. You feel hope. But keeping warm is more than just fire maintenance. Oh no, it's a full-body ritual. First, plug every crevice. The walls of your hut are enthusiastic about letting the outside in. Wind whistles through gaps like a rude house guest. To stop it, you shove everything into the cracks: moss, mud, straw, socks, old clothing, pieces of bread you'd rather not talk about. Eventually your hut looks like a giant rodent nest, but hey, it's your rodent nest. Second, dress like an onion. We've discussed layers, but here, layering becomes an art form. You add shirts, you add coats, you add scarves over other scarves until you look like a fabric comet. Your arms barely bend, your neck disappears. Fashion is irrelevant, you've transcended vanity. The only thing that matters is preventing your soul from freezing solid and sliding out your body like an ice cube. Third, master the sacred squat. This is the preferred posture for warming yourself close to the ground, curled in like a startled hedgehog, toes pressed to the stove, face hovering dangerously above open flame. The squat gives your legs a break, concentrates heat, and lets you pretend you're a forest creature hibernating. You've never been so spiritually aligned with a squirrel. Of course, your stove is not reliable. Sometimes it just dies. One moment it's blazing, the next it's nothing but a pile of judgmental ashes. You panic. You drop everything to revive it, blowing into the embers like you're giving CPR to your last remaining hope. Eventually it coughs back to life. You sigh. Crisis averted. Everyone returns to pretending everything is normal. Those who can build a good fire become social outcasts. Fire building skill is more important than charisma, beauty, or literacy. If you can make flames from damp wood and sheer willpower, you're a legend. Your neighbors trade you food and favors in exchange for your expertise. If you can tea, you will spend many nights contemplating your life choices under a frozen blanket. Staying warm isn't only about heat, it's about strategy. You learn that warming your hands is pointless unless you also warm your feet. You learn that sleeping next to the wall is foolish, it is where dreams go to die. Instead, you sleep near the stove, rotating like a rotisserie chicken to distribute warmth evenly. If someone tries to take your spot, you hiss. Consider this normal. Nighttime brings new challenges. The fire slowly fades. You wake every few hours to stoke it, stumbling around the hut like a confused bear. You feed logs into the stove with shaky hands, praying you don't drop one on your foot. The rest of the hut sleeps on, blissfully unaware that yes, you are the sole barrier between life and becoming frozen exhibit pieces. Then there's body heat camaraderie. You cuddle. Everyone cuddles. Cousins, strangers, probably an occasional chicken. It is not romantic, it is survival. You form human burritos, tightly packed together, sharing warmth like broke roommates sharing shampoo. You may not know someone's name, but you know how warm they are. That's what matters. Sometimes you're outside for hours working. You learn techniques, swing tools constantly to keep blood moving, tuck your hands into your armpits, stomp your feet so they remember you exist. You hunch over the fire whenever you can, letting the flames lick warmth back into your bones. The smoke follows you into your clothes, your hair, your lungs. You don't care. Warm smoke is still warm. Ironically, the cold teaches you appreciation. A warm mug of weak tea becomes profound. A piece of sun through the clouds feels divine. A good fire, pure joy. You sit beside it, staring into the flames, thinking about nothing. For a moment, time slows. Your heartbeat steadies. You feel human again. Because warmth is more than temperature here, it is hope. It is community. It is the thread tying you to the next day. You survive by feeding your stove. Your stove survives by feeding you warmth. And together, you endure. This is not just staying warm, it is worship. Welcome to the Church of Fire. Wolves patrol the wilderness like the world's strictest neighborhood watch. They don't like your face. Stay inside. At least that's what everyone tells you. Wolves in Siberia don't behave like wolves from cartoons. They are not here to help you raise your child in the jungle, and they certainly want to sing you show tunes. These wolves are all business, cold-nosed, sharp-toothed, fur-covered committees enforcing their own mysterious bylaws. As you peer out of your hut, you sometimes spot them. Grey shapes moving silently through the snow. They look like shadows that grew opinions. Their eyes glow faintly, either from reflecting firelight or from judging you personally. Somehow you can tell they know you are new. You feel them reviewing your permit application to exist. You imagine what the wolves say to each other. That one looks weak. Probably can't run. True, but he has a stick. Respect the stick. Wolves don't attack all the time. They prefer to lurk stalking, sniffing, performing unannounced inspections. You're outside gathering wood, minding your own business, when suddenly you feel the hairs on your neck rise. You pivot nothing. Then, just as you sigh in relief, two gleaming eyes appear between the trees. You freeze, not because you choose to, but because your brain has left the building. Congratulations, you have been noticed by the HOA. You do what locals taught you. You stand tall, wave your arms, and yell something assertive like, "No!" It sounds less intimidating than you hoped, more like a confused goose. The wolf cocks its head, clearly unimpressed. So you bang sticks together. You jump up and down. You try to look large, even though you feel like a terrified potato. The wolf eventually leaves, not because you scared it, but because it got bored. You return to camp shaking, whispering, "So that's enough outside for the year." Villagers give practical advice. Travel in groups, stay near fire. Maybe don't smell like fear. You try all three. They do nothing. The wolves know your schedule. They are always there after dusk when the forest becomes a black ocean of branches and frozen breath. You hear them howl long, echoing notes that slip through the cracks in your hut and into your dreams. The sound makes your bones remember they are hollow. It's both beautiful and awful, like an orchestra dedicated to your eventual demise. Sometimes, entire packs prowl the settlement edges. You see their paw prints in the snow, enormous impressions that make dogs look like real stuffed animals. You learn to read them like tea leaves. 2 prints scouting, 4 prints opportunity. A whole cluster time to pack your things and move into the stove. Even guards respect wolves. Their muskets are unreliable in the cold, and wolves don't care about rank or medals. You've seen armed men glance nervously into the trees like kids checking under the bed. If the guards are scared, you are allowed to panic. But wolves aren't always villains. Sometimes they eat the more terrifying creatures like bears, or escaped criminals, or the guy who stole your bread last week. Morally complicated but convenient. Wolves are apex opportunists. They follow hunting parties hoping for scraps. They trail sledders in deep winter waiting to see who falls behind. They patrol rivers in spring snagging fish as the ice breaks. They are nature's auditors, quiet, efficient, and deeply uninterested in your excuses. Once, during late winter, a pack gets bold. They circle a hut on the far side of the settlement, testing the wooden walls with claws and teeth. Inside, the occupants huddle by the stove, listening to scraping sounds on timber. The next morning, they find deep gouges marking the door. Everyone admires the craftsmanship while silently vowing to never sleep again. Still, there are stories of coexistence. Old herders say wolves are honorable, they hunt to eat, not for sport. They take what they need. They watch humans with curiosity, not malice. They respect strength, and they love reindeer, which creates problems. If you help herd reindeer, congratulations. You've entered an unspoken feud. Wolves see reindeer as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You spend your time yelling, clanging metal, and praying no one dies. It is customer service, but furrier. Every winter when food grows scarce, wolves get bold. They come closer. They sniff doorways. They shadow logging crews. Sometimes you glimpse one from 10 feet away. You lock eyes. Time slows. You both share a look that says, "Not today." You back away slowly. The wolf does the same. A mutual respect forms thin, but real. Modern comparison. Imagine living in a HOA-controlled neighborhood where wolves enforce the regulations. They don't send emails, they send teeth. They don't ticket you. They stare at you from the garden until you comply. You mow the snow. You pay your dues. You stay alive. Surprisingly, the wolves teach you something. Mindfulness. Every trip outside is intentional. Every footstep considered. You learn to listen to wind, trees, crunching snow. You develop instincts. You fling scraps far from camp. You build fires high. You whistle nervously while carrying logs. And sometimes, late at night, you step outside. The cold bites your face. Above you, stars shine like broken glass. In the distance, a wolf howls. Another answers, then another. Their chorus fills the forest, vast and wild. And even though you're terrified, because you always will be, you also feel wonder. These wolves survive here by their own rules, just like you. They are your adversaries, yes, but also your neighbors, your rivals, your teachers. You share the forest. Because no one, not even exiles, own Siberia, the wolves do, and they always have. You and fellow exiles gather to talk about anything except how cold you are. Which is impressive, because the cold is currently eating your bones like a squirrel chewing on a pine cone. But that's the rule. The social hour is sacred, your nightly attempt to pretend life is more than frostbite and emotional collapse. There is no tavern, there is no bar, there's only a smoky hut with a stove that works about 60 of the time, and benches that are basically splinters, held together by optimism. But it's enough. You shuffle in with a few others, lumberjacks, miners, religious exiles, that one guy who definitely committed tax fraud before Shah's Russia had taxes. Everyone smells vaguely of smoke, sweat, snow, and existential fatigue. It's fine. You've stopped noticing. The room is small. Too small. You must sit very close to strangers, pressed together like you're a salt cod in a barrel. Personal space is a myth. Elbows touch. Knees collide. Someone's foot rests on yours because there is nowhere else to put it. Everyone pretends this is normal because it is. There's a gentle hum of conversation. Not loud conversation you're too tired for, that just light murmuring, punctuated by the occasional hacking cough. People talk about trivial things. Did anyone see rabbit tracks yesterday? Who fixed the roof on Hut 7? Which guard fell into a snowbank and cried about it? Small joys. Nobody wants to talk about work if someone starts. So today I accidentally inhaled a pound of mine dust and everyone groans. No work talk during social hour, they warn, throwing bits of stale bread at the offender. Instead, you trade stories about the absurdity of this place. My boots froze to the floor last night. My soup froze before I finished eating. My eyelashes froze together. I almost died mid-blink. Each tale earns nods and wheezy laughter. No one has energy for full-bodied laughter. If someone did, you'd assume they were ill. Sometimes someone breaks out a musical instrument, if you can call it that. A balalaika missing 2 strings, a flute carved from despair. The player plucks or blows something resembling music. Everyone closes their eyes. You let the notes wash over you like lukewarm tea. It's not good, but goodness is irrelevant. It is sound that isn't wind or wolves. That's enough. Some nights singing erupts low, humming murmurs that weave through the smoky air. Lullabies, folk tunes, half-forgotten hymns, songs about home, songs about longing, songs about bread that didn't require a hammer. You sing too, though your voice cracks like frozen branches. Then come the jokes. Siberian jokes are dry as stale porridge. How do you know you're in Siberia? You don't, someone tells you. 2 men meet in exile. What did you do? Nothing. Liar. Everyone here did nothing. It is dark humour. You laugh not because it is hilarious, but because it hurts slightly less than crying. Some people gossip. The priest in the next settlement married 3 couples last week. 1 guard. Tried to flirt with a reindeer and fell into a river. A wolf chased a noble into a tree, where he stayed for 2 hours until villagers negotiated his release with raw meat. Everyone loves that story. Tea occasionally appears. Someone bartered a precious bundle of leaves earlier. You share a pot. The tea tastes like water that has been politely introduced to a leaf from 30 feet away. Still, it is warm and bitter and real. Your hands tighten around the cup, savouring every molecule of warmth it offers. You discuss weather, but only lightly. Weather talk is the gateway to cold talk, and cold talk ruins the vibe. You say things like, "It is crisp today." Crisp means my eyelids froze shut. A little breezy means someone lost a child temporarily. Everyone understands the code. Sometimes a newcomer arrives fresh from the long march. Their eyes are wide, their clothes are thin, they tremble like newborn foals. You welcome them with pity and bread. You tell them, yes, it is terrible. Yes, it is survivable. No, the wolves are not pets. Yes, the stove is God. Some nights, conversation turns philosophical. Is suffering meaningful? Will anyone remember us? What is soup? Answers vary. Then, occasionally someone reads. Many exiles were educated intellectuals, political dissidents, academics. One might have smuggled a book of poetry. They read quietly. Words float through the hut like firelight, gentle, flickering, brief. You listen, transported. Maybe you close your eyes and imagine you're home. The poem ends. Silence follows. Everyone breathes deeply, then resumes joking about frostbite. Conversation quiets as night deepens. Some people drift off mid-sentence, heads bobbing. Others wrap shawls tighter. The fire crackles, sputters, exhales. The room grows warm not just from heat, but from presence. You feel the rare glow of community, of being seen, of not being entirely alone in the snow globe of this universe. Eventually someone stretches and yawns, signalling the end. Everyone shuffles back to their huts. You step outside. The stars blaze, distant and cold. The snow crunches. You tuck your chin into your scarf and walk home. Inside, you crawl onto your bed of straw and fur. Your bones ache, your skin stings, but your heart is a little lighter. Because tonight, for one brief hour, you weren't just an exile, you were a person. Together quietly, awkwardly, half-frozen, you made something like joy. As long as you have that, you can survive. Some exiles create plays to keep spirits up. Expect low-budget costumes. And by low budget, we mean a blanket, a hat, and a questionable moustache drawn with charcoal. These are not prestige productions. No one is winning a Tony. But in a land where you've forgotten what joy feels like, even a mediocre performance is enough to send the audience into rapturous, frost-nibbled applause. Theatre here isn't about glamour, it's about survival. It is about remembering there's more to life than chopping logs and hoping wolves ignore you. You first hear about the theatre from a miner named Pavel, who leans over during social hour and whispers, "They are putting on a comedy tonight. A comedy in Siberia." That's like hearing someone made a spy out of a swamp. Naturally you go. The venue is a barn. Of course it is. It smells like hay and damp humanity. But there's a warm stove in the corner so no one complains. The stage is a wooden plank elevated by a few buckets. The lighting is whatever moonlight sneaks through the cracks, plus a few candles that flicker dramatically often at the wrong moment. You cram inside with 50 other people, knees against backs, breath mingling into a communal fog. Everyone waits, shivering, hopeful. For a brief moment you forget the cold. You forget the mines. You're just part of an audience in the middle of nowhere. The curtains or blankets nailed to a beam part. The show begins. A man steps out dressed as a noblewoman. His wig is made of twine. His dress is a patched bedsheet. He speaks in a falsetto so shrill it could cut ice. The crowd howls, not because he's convincing, but because it's absurd. He exaggerates every gesture, flinging his arms like he's swatting invisible bees. When his moustache begins slipping down his face, he just sticks it back on with spit and keeps going. The audience roars. The plot is simple. A jealous husband suspects his wife of running away with a travelling shoemaker. Half the cast forgets their lines. The shoemaker S-prop shoe breaks halfway through. Someone trips, accidentally knocks over a candle, and spends 10 frantic seconds stomping out a fire while staying in character. Everyone cheers like it was intentional. If you're lucky, there is music someone on a balalaika with 2 working strings, plucking away as though the instrument might explode if handled too enthusiastically. Occasionally they break into song, folk tunes about love, exile, potatoes, and dying dramatically of the sniffles. The entire room hums along. Behind the laughter, though, there is more happening. These plays are tiny acts of rebellion, a way to reclaim humanity from the cold. To mock authority, life, and the terrible hand fate has dealt everyone here. Sarcasm runs deep. Someone impersonates a guard, puffing his chest and yelling nonsense orders like, "Do not breathe too warm. Save heat for Tsar." The crowd loses its mind. Not all theatre is comedy. Some nights, there's tragedy serious pieces performed by passionate exiles who studied literature back when their biggest problem was meal etiquette. They deliver monologues about love, loss, and the cruelty of fate while wearing socks on their hands as gloves. You might cry. Or maybe that's just your tear ducts freezing. There's also political satire very carefully delivered, because nobody wants to add 10 years to their sentence. The jokes are coded. The tyrant with big chin and small heart, everyone nods knowingly. They laugh, but quietly. No one wants the Tsar, hearing about this from 3,000 miles away. Props come from anything at hand. A pot becomes a helmet. A broom becomes a horse. A ladle becomes a scepter. Imagination does the heavy lifting. You are amazed at how quickly you accept that a stick with a scarf on it is now a major character. During intermissions, someone hands out tea if you're lucky, boiled water if you're not. People chat, complimenting actors who clearly forgot half their lines and improvise the rest with enthusiasm and confusion. It doesn't matter, the point is showing up, participating, being alive. The best part is watching the guards pretend they're not enjoying themselves. They stand stiffly near the doorway, trying to maintain authority, but you notice the smiles, the barely contained chuckles. Even they need a break from the monotony of cold and misery. Sometimes children perform tiny actors bundled in wool, reciting jokes written by somebody older but equally unhinged. They bow and grin, forgetting they're supposed to be miserable. The crowd softens. Adults clap too loudly, fueled by the need to protect these small sparks of joy. Afterward, people linger. Some discuss the show. Others offer suggestions for next time. More wolves, someone shouts. Less wolves, another counters. A writer scribbles ideas. Stories about love lost on the step. A prince whose only treasure is a warm sock. A comedy about logging accidents because humour is healing. You head home feeling unexpectedly lighter. Your face hurts from smiling. Your lungs feel full. The cold outside still gnaws at your bones, but now your heart has insulation, laughter, connection, a reminder that art matters, even or especially when everything hurts. In a land where winter never leaves and hope feels like a rumour, theatre gives you air. It says, you are human, you can imagine, you can laugh. And that is enough. Education didn't disappear. Smart exiles teach kids to read and write so they can pen letters home complaining about the weather. Because if there's one thing humans cling to, even in exile, it is the urge to pass on knowledge and to complain. Siberia might be the frozen end of the earth, but somehow, someone always shows up with a stack of smuggled primers, a piece of charcoal, and the audacity to believe learning still matters. The schoolhouse is usually a hut or barn with questionable insulation, sometimes a corner of a communal hut, where children sit on rough planks, trying not to get splinters in character-building places. On particularly cold days, class meets around the stove, students packed tightly like academic sardines. You kneel close, feeling heat on your shins and cold everywhere else. Your teacher, a former noble, a priest, a poet, or a doctor who expressed one political opinion too many. They've gone from debating philosophy in salons to yelling, "Stop eating your ink!" at children with runny noses and boundless determination. Sometimes they share their stories about universities far west, where winter is lighter and walls have real insulation. The kids stare, amazed. Walls? That work? Surely a myth. Rather than fancy textbooks, students write on scraps of birch bark or reused paper. Charcoal stands in for ink. Wooden boards act as chalk slates. Desks don't exist. If you want to take notes, you do so in your lap, balancing bark like a futuristic tablet that splinters if handled too confidently. Subjects are simple: reading, writing, counting, scripture, and the occasional life lesson like how not to die of hypothermia on the way home. Geography class is easy. This is Russia. This is Siberia. We live here now, forever. Everyone sighs. Still, there's pride. Reading offers a world beyond snow and wood chips. Letters become lifelines. Kids learn to write home, filling pages or strips of bark with dramatic accounts. Father, the wind tried to kill me again. Mother, please send socks thicker than bread. Some families respond, others do not. Regardless, the act of writing gives kids a sense of connection, as if the world hasn't forgotten them entirely. You sometimes sit in class as an adult. Why not? Your schedule is flexible, and you'd like to remember what letters look like beyond the ones labelling your chain weights. You listen as children recite stories, stuttering but proud. Their voices shake like Siberian leaves, mostly from cold, but a little from excitement. The school isn't just for kids. Adults gather at night for lessons, language, math, even political discussions behind carefully closed doors. A former professor gives a passionate lecture about poetry, his breath fogging in the air like punctuation. Everyone nods thoughtfully, though part of their brain whispers, "My toes are dying." But there's humour. During class, an ambitious student once asked, "Teacher, why do we learn?" The teacher, wrapping himself in rags, answered, "Because ignorance is worse than cold." Everyone paused, considering this. Then someone muttered, "Debatable," and everyone laughed. Discipline is gentle. Teachers know the students are already living on hard mode. If a child forgets homework, they shrug. If a student falls asleep mid-lesson, they let them rest. Who wouldn't he? Sleep is precious, and warmth even more so. On especially frigid days, class becomes stare at the fire and imagine Greece. Sometimes they host recitations, tiny public performances where children read poetry or tell stories, parents gather, grinning awkwardly, pretending everything is normal while icicles form in their eyebrows. The kids beam with pride. Someone recites Pushkin in a voice so small the words freeze mid-air. Teachers are respected, even feared a little, not because they punish, but because they hold knowledge. They know things like how to spell unbearably cold and why snowflakes exist. They also know how to solve basic math, which is impressive given everything around them constantly subtracts joy. Some lessons are practical: how to mend boots, how to track animals, how to layer clothes so you resemble a well-read cabbage. Kids absorb it all, eager to survive and tell their future grandchildren how miserable it was. Sometimes school takes place outside because the hut is needed for repairs or secretly occupied by wolves. The kids stand near a stump. The teacher draws letters in snow with a stick. The snow erases everything, but that just means extra review. Repetition builds memory, or frostbite. Despite hardship, learning is a rebellion. It declares, "We are more than prisoners. Knowledge becomes armor." A poem tucked in memory warms more reliably than a torn coat. Classmates become friends. Teachers become family. Ideas become fire. You watch a child read for the first time slowly, carefully, cheeks flushed. The whole room cheers. The stove crackles in approval. Outside, the wind howls its discontent, but inside something quiet and warm blooms. Education endures not because conditions are good, but because people refuse to let it die. Even here, at the farthest edges of empire, minds continue to sharpen. Hope continues to whisper. Children learn to write their names, then the names of those they miss, then letters describing their new world. One day, a student hands you a scrawled note. It says they explain proudly, "I am warm today." You smile. It's not true. But the thought is, because sometimes warmth is a lesson, and learning is how you survive. There's no doctor, no pharmacy, just herbs, hot water, and vibes. If you get sick, people pray you'll recover or at least cough quietly so you don't wake everyone up. In Siberia, catching a cold is a lifestyle, and catching something worse is basically a group project no one wanted to join. You learn very quickly that illness isn't the event here. It's a hobby. Everyone participates eventually. Symptoms begin subtly: a small shiver, a scratchy throat, a cough that echoes in the small hut like an insult. You try to ignore it, hoping your immune system is feeling ambitious today. But soon your lungs wheeze like an accordion played by an exhausted goat, and your nose becomes a faucet that refuses to turn off, even though water is still technically frozen everywhere else. There's no trained medical professional in sight. Maybe someone once knew a doctor, or studied anatomy before being exiled for having thoughts. That person is now the Settlement S unofficial physician. Their credentials include: read a book once, saw a surgery from a distance, can boil water. Step 1 of treatment is always the same: boil water. This is less about sanitation and more about giving you something hot to cling to while your body falls apart. If you're lucky, someone tosses in herbs, pine needles, willow bark, maybe some mystery leaves that might cure you or might give you hallucinations of dancing elk. Either way, SC entertainment. Then comes the poultice phase. Poultices are magical compresses made of mash plants, animal fat, snow, very healing, or whatever was lying on the floor. They're placed on your chest, forehead, or wherever ailing seems to be happening most aggressively. People hover around you, adjusting your blankets, murmuring advice, and telling elaborate folk stories about other sick people who either survived or dramatically didn't. You get broth if there is broth. If not, you get warm water and encouragement. Someone brews tea using bark. It tastes like regret, but it is warm. Warmth is the only benchmark that counts. Does it warm you? Good. Does it taste awful? Better. That means it's medicinal. Fever is common. When it hits, you sweat under layers of rags, dreaming of beaches you've never seen. People wipe your forehead with snow or furs, both equally questionable methods. One neighbor firmly believes sweat carries the sickness away. Another insists cold air lures it out. They argue over your bed like rival podcast hosts. Don T asks for real medicine. The closest thing you get is willow bark, nature's early attempt at aspirin. It helps with pain. Does it taste good? Absolutely not. It is bitter enough to reset your personality, but you choke it down because your head feels like it's auditioning to be an exploding star. If you are lucky, and we mean lucky, there is a priest who learned some first aid back when he thought his life would involve sermons instead of mining. He prays over you, sprinkles holy water, and tells you to stay warm. The holy water freezes mid-air because Siberia is rude, but the gesture is appreciated. Serious illness like pneumonia turns your hut into a wellness resort run by people who have no idea what they are doing. You're tucked as close to the stove as humanly possible. You're rotated on a schedule, like bread. Someone keeps you awake during the night to make sure you are still breathing. When you cough, they nod encouragingly. Good. That means you're alive. If you have something contagious, the hut becomes a quarantine zone. People slide food through the door and yell advice from a safe distance. Drink water, they shout. Think warm thoughts, as though imagination alone could melt snow. Strangely, community is your greatest treatment. Neighbors check on you, offering scraps of food, bits of wool, or that one miracle clean snow to melt. Children bring laughter, adults bring stories. Someone sits by your side, humming old songs. It's not medicine, but it keeps your spirit from freezing solid. When illness passes, and usually it does, miraculously you emerge from your hut like a newly evolved creature. Everyone cheers. Someone offers you bread. The priest gives thanks. You are carried into the sun, which is lying, it is still freezing, and told to breathe real air. It tastes like pine and suffering. If someone doesn't make it well, tragedy is quick here. The ground is frozen, so burials can be complicated. Sometimes people wait for spring. Sometimes they dig together, hacking at ice with solemn dedication. There are prayers, tears, silence. Then life resumes because it must. Through all of this, you learn a profound truth. The line between life and death here is thin. And yet, people keep fighting. They mash herbs, they boil water, they stay awake through the night. They hope desperately. It's not sophisticated medicine. It is not clean. It is not guaranteed. But it's care. And surprisingly, it often works not because the herbs are magical, though who knows, but because people refuse to let each other face the cold alone. Illness is a constant shadow in Siberia, but so is compassion, and that more than anything keeps you alive. Your fingers go numb, turn weird colors, and sometimes just leave. It's like your body unsubscribes from itself. At first you think frostbite is just really cold skin. Cute. Harmless. A little winter inconvenience like forgetting your gloves or discovering your socks have betrayed you. But no. Frostbite is Siberia's way of saying, Give me that toe. You are not using it correctly. And there's not much you can do about it except yell quietly into the void. Frostbite doesn't arrive with trumpets. It sneaks up on you, stealthier than a wolf with boundary issues. One moment you're chopping wood. The next, you notice your fingers are suspiciously numb, like they've filed for emotional distance. At first, this feels convenient. No pain. But then the numbness deepens. Your fingers stiffen. You poke them. Nothing. You think, maybe. They're shy. They aren't shy. They were dying. The locals warn you. The cold isn't just unfriendly, it's predatory. It loves exposed skin. Ears, nose, cheeks, hands, feet. Anything sticking out is considered fair game. You learn to wrap yourself like a wool burrito before stepping outside. But some days, even burrito mode isn't enough. You walk to work, face covered, hands gloved, body layered to oblivion, and still you return missing sensation in places you'd really prefer to keep. Early frostbite looks innocent. Your skin goes pale, then pinkish, then a delicate shade of concerning. It burns, then tingles, then stops sending messages altogether. This is when panic sets in. You hold your hand out to the nearest warm body and whisper, "Is this normal?" The warm body looks, shrugs, and says, "Dunk it in warm water, and pray." Warm water is your first line of defense, assuming you have any. Warm is hard to achieve when everything around you is aggressively anti-liquid. Sometimes snow melted on a stove is the best you can do. So you simmer your hands like overcooked dumplings and hope sensation returns. Often it does, accompanied by screaming pain that makes you rethink your commitment to living. If the feeling returns, congratulations, you get to keep your fingers, at least this week. If the feeling doesn't return well, you've entered the frostbite danger zone. Your digits turn greyish blue, like they were auditioning to be decorative stones. They feel hard, waxy, suspiciously quiet. Everyone avoids eye contact with your hand because nobody wants to deliver the bad news. The cold has repossessed your parts. There are only so many choices. If they go black, they are done. There is no surgery wing here, no sterile operating rooms, no trained surgeons waiting with scalpels and encouragement. You have kitchen knives, you have fire, you have the kind of enthusiasm you only get when you're desperate. Sometimes the body simply ejects the damaged piece. It dries out, shrinks, and eventually falls off like a crayon tip. Nobody celebrates. Someone just quietly sweeps it into the snow. During social hour, someone may say, "Hey, where's your finger?" You reply, "Gone to a better place." Everyone nods solemnly. The worst part isn't losing pieces, it is pretending you're fine while it happens. You still have to work. Mining doesn't stop just because you're down 2 toes. Logging doesn't pause because your left hand resembles a stone. You adjust awkwardly. You grip tools differently. You limp. Nobody comments because everyone is missing something. Exiles like mismatched dolls, one ear here, one toe there. It's a patchwork community. The cold is especially skilled at stealing from your feet. You wear socks upon socks, wool, linen, scraps, fur, yet still the cold sneaks in like a tax collector. One morning you wake up and find 3 toes look suspicious. You tap them. They don't tap back. Congratulations. You've unlocked hard mode. The wise ones, those who've survived winters without heavy losses, teach preventative rituals. Never stop moving. Wiggle fingers. Stomp feet. Avoid moisture. Don't touch metal with bare skin unless you want to become one with it. They remind you to warm your extremities near the stove, but not too close, unless you want burns to complement the frostbite. You learn to balance. Modern comparison. Imagine waking up, finding one finger has color-coded itself midnight blueberry, and calmly thinking, Yes, the cold has claimed another dividend. Meanwhile, you still have to go to work. But instead of Zoom calls, you are chopping ice or hauling logs. There is also the emotional side. People grieve their pieces. You remember what it felt like to wiggle all your toes, to fully hold a spoon, to scratch your nose without having to strategize. Now you adapt. You eat slower, you walk differently, you relearn tasks. In Siberia, losing parts is an expected inconvenience, like misplacing your keys, but more permanent. Occasionally someone jokes about it. My left ear left me. We weren't close anyway. Humour helps, or makes everything worse. Hard to tell. Frostbite teaches humility. You become hyper-aware of your body, grateful for every finger that still responds. You treat gloves like treasure, fire like royalty. You learn that your body is fragile and the environment is boss. You accept that survival isn't as just strength, it is luck, attention, and fast footwork. In the end, frostbite is a constant threat, a border patrol between you and functioning limbs. Every day, you negotiate. Some days, you win. Some days, you lose a pinky. But you keep going. Because even missing a few pieces, you are still here. And in Siberia, being here is the victory. You can try running away. Too bad everything around you is frozen emptiness. You will probably just be found by wolves or the cold. That's the first thing people tell you when you arrive. Escape is possible in your imagination. The second thing they tell you is, also, don't lose your hat. Neither is particularly comforting. Siberia is the worst place to attempt to break out because the land itself is Team Tsar. There are no roads, no friendly towns around the corner, just a horizon made of snow, more snow, and a bonus serving of existential dread. Even if you sprinted full speed for 3 days, you'd probably still be within earshot of the guy who snores in your hut. Still, the idea of escape lingers in your mind like an annoying pop song. You fantasize, running through trees, dodging wolves, eating berries, befriending a bear. It sounds incredible, until reality taps you on the shoulder and whispers, "Buddy, you can't even keep your fingers warm." Let's talk logistics. First, the weather. Winter here isn't a season. It is a personality. Malicious. Creative. It seeks out any exposed skin and files a claim on it. You think you can run 200 miles in temperatures that make boiling water freeze before it hits the ground? Good luck, even if you made it. 10 miles, your toes would send in their resignation letter. Second, the geography. You cannot fathom how big Siberia is. Calling it big is like calling the ocean slightly damp. You could walk forever. In fact, some exiles did walk forever. They never returned. The guards assumed they escaped. The wolves assumed they were snacks. In truth, they probably became a popsicle with opinions. Third, the wolves. Remember them? They're the Siberian HOA. Except instead of fining you for unauthorized patio furniture, they fine you in chunks of flesh. If you're out there alone, wolves trail you at a polite distance, deciding whether you're dinner or just a weirdo. Eventually they take a vote. The vote is never in your favor. Fourth, the guards. Oddly enough, guards don't panic when someone escapes. They sigh, take a head count and tell each other, "He'll be back," like you're a sulky teen running away to the next neighborhood over. And they were usually right. Sometimes, an escapee staggers back into camp half frozen, muttering, "Sorry, I panicked. Can I have soup?" Everyone pretends this is normal. Escape plans vary in ambition and foolishness. Some exiles try the walk straight and hope for the best approach. This involves walking straight, hoping for the best. Spoiler: the best never happens. Others are more creative. One man crafted skis out of firewood, Thinking he'd glide to freedom like a majestic goose, he made it 10 minutes before face-planting into a snowbank and losing both skis to a curious wolf. The wolf later returned one ski. No one knows why. Possibly as a receipt. There are stories of people making boats and trying to follow rivers. The problem is that rivers freeze, so they carried their boat across the ice, which is less escape and more performance art. Eventually, they gave up and used the boat as extra firewood. Best choice they ever made. Some tried waiting until summer, but summer in Siberia is just winter with mosquitoes. Instead of frostbite, you get eaten by bugs so large they have zip codes. The roads turn to mud, the rivers flood, and the forests become steaming jungles. Running away becomes swimming in misery. But despite all logic, people still try. Because the human brain is stubborn. Hope is stubborn. You sit by the stove at night, staring into the flames, imagining the impossible. A path to freedom, a miracle encounter, a friendly caravan headed west, someone to guide you through the wilderness. You think, maybe I could do it. Then you step outside and immediately reconsider. The cold slaps you in the face like an irate grandmother. Your eyelashes freeze. The wind screams no. You return to your hut, curl under pelts and think, maybe tomorrow. The truth, escape isn't just about running. It's about surviving what comes after. Even if you evade guards, dodge wolves and make it 50 miles, you need food, shelter, fire, navigation skills, a map, luck. An entire survival skill tree that you absolutely do not possess. Most escapees don't die because someone catches them. They die because nature shrugs and says, you weren't invited, but the idea remains. Always. At night during social hour, someone brings it up. I heard of a guy who made it home. Everyone leans in. He walked for months, hid in villages, begged his way west. People gasp. Hearts stir. Then someone adds, but then he got caught and sent back. Everyone groans. You sip your weak tea thinking, figures. Yet, even the failures give hope. Some survived a few weeks on the run. A few even made it to large towns. Rumors swirl. Escape is possible, but difficult, rare, mythic, like winning the lottery, or finding a warm sock. You know the truth. Escape is a fantasy, a coping mechanism, an imaginary door in a windowless room. But still, on the coldest nights, when the fire is low and the hut is quiet, you imagine running. You imagine forests, freedom, sunlight. You imagine getting home. It warms you just a little. Then you sleep, because tomorrow you wake up still here. And survival, not escape, is the work. You write letters to your family, unsure if they'll ever arrive. Paper is rare, ink is rarer, hope is rarest of all. So naturally you combine these three endangered substances into one fragile act of emotional chaos, writing home. First, you scavenge for materials. A proper sheet of paper. Hilarious. Most exiles write on scraps, bits of old books, birch bark, repurposed official paperwork that definitely still smells like a clerk's disappointment. Ink is at best mud mixed with soot, or berry juice that stains fingers and hearts alike. If you are lucky enough to know someone who smuggled actual ink, you treat it like liquid diamonds. And by treat it, we mean don to spill it on your lap, Pavel. Again, you hunch by the stove because your fingers refuse to cooperate unless the temperature is above icicle. You wrap your right hand in layer after layer of cloth to keep it functional, then unwrap just enough to hold a dull quill. Writing with frozen hands is like trying to knit while wearing oven mitts, technically possible, humiliating in practice. But you begin. Dearest family, I am alive. It is the most important news. It is also the bar you set it low so everything after sounds mildly encouraging. You try to describe your life. The cold, the work, the wolves, the cold again. You don't want them to worry, so you lie. Just a little. You say the winters are crisp, work is challenging, and food is simple. You do not mention the time your eyelashes froze together, and you panicked because you thought you were being spiritually kidnapped. You write about new friends, the people who share their last crumb of bread, or their funniest tragedy. You mention the man who tells jokes about the Zara's hat size. You mention the woman who can identify 30 types of snow by smell. Powdery despair is your favourite. Sometimes you include poetry, prayers, or rough drawings of your hut, which looks like a lopsided sandwich. You tell them you are learning new skills, like how to patch a boot with a pine cone, and how to avoid becoming wolf or doves. You keep the tone upbeat, clean, almost cheerful. If a guard read it, he might think Siberia was a mildly rustic vacation spot, where the activities include frostbite and existentialism. Then comes the emotional part. You ask about home, the farm, the neighbours, whether the cat still hates everyone. You ask if the river floods in spring like it always did, even though you know the river doesn't care. You ask about birthdays you missed and celebrations that passed without you. You imagine your family reading your words aloud around the hearth, passing your letter around like fragile treasure. You end with promises. I will return. I will see you again. I think of you every night. You seal the letter or fold it or tie it up with string made of hopeful thoughts. Then you wait. In theory, these letters are collected by officials sometimes monthly, sometimes whenever someone remembers. The officials place them in sacks which travel by horse or cart or magic. You assume, because deliveries are inconsistent, the sacks take long journeys through snow, swamp, and boredom. Some letters make it. Some don tea. Some arrive years later, wrinkled and tired, like they also served a sentence. Days pass, weeks, maybe months. Then, one evening during social hour, word spreads. Mail is here. Everyone bolts from their seats, which is impressive because most of you have joints that sound like old door hinges. You crowd around the guard holding a bundle of letters. He reads names. Every name is a lightning bolt. People hold their breath with religious intensity. Sometimes your name is called, sometimes it isn't. If you read lucky, you get a letter of your own. It is precious thin, soft, written by hands far away. You open it carefully, breath shallow. The words spill out. We are well. We think of you every day. We pray for your return. You clutch it. You read it again and again until the paper threatens to dissolve from humidity and tears. If no letter comes, you pretend you are fine. You say, it probably got lost. Everyone nods. They know that lie. They've used it too. Some letters arrive bearing bad news someone passed away. A loved one fell ill. A child grew up without you. You sit quietly, holding grief like a small animal. Others gather around, sharing warmth without words. Once, a letter reaches you that's already outdated. We hope the harvest will be good this year, your family writes 3 years ago. You smile, a small, sad smile. Then you tuck it inside your coat, close to your heart, where it burns warmly despite the cold. You store every letter tied with thread, hidden from dampness and mice. They travel with you through every assignment, every hut, every winter. They are proof that someone knows your name somewhere beyond the snow. Sometimes, when morale drops, a literate exile reads letters aloud to those who cannot read. The room fills with laughter, tears, longing. A father hears his child's first written words. A wife hears that her husband still remembers the colour of her eyes. For a moment, you're all transported miles away, into kitchens and gardens and warm rooms full of bread. and when night falls, you tuck your letters near your sleeping spot. The wolves howl outside, the wind rages, but you sleep on, wrapped in words that cross the world to reach you. Letters home are not just letters, they are lifelines, little pieces of the world you lost and might someday return to. Paperwork exists, even here, because misery is temporary but forms are eternal. The Tsar may be thousands of miles away, but his paperwork reaches you faster than warm feelings ever will. You assumed exile would liberate you from administrative hassle. You were wrong. Siberia isn't organized, but somehow there's always a man with a quill lurking nearby, ready to record your suffering in triplicate. You learn this on your second day. A guard approaches, hands you a sheet of paper and says, "Sign." You ask what you're signing. He shrugs. Something. You sign anyway because your fingers are numb and you've accepted that questions are for warm people. The document probably says something like, "I, the undersigned, agree to freeze politely and not complain too loudly." Or maybe it's a receipt. The guard files it into a stack that immediately gets snowed on, blown away, and eaten by a goat. Still counts. Every movement in Siberia requires documentation. Arriving at a settlement? Documented. Leaving the settlement to chop wood? Documented. Returning from chopping wood missing 2 fingers? Also documented along with a helpful note. Patient appears lighter. Bureaucracy doesn't care about your survival. It cares about recording your survival or lack thereof. Once a month, or whenever someone remembers, the settlement posts a list of resident exiles. Name, crime, arrival date, notes such as complains too much, or weird relationship with wolves. You always check for your name. If it is still there, congratulations, you still exist. Guards maintain ledgers that look ancient enough to predate the alphabet. They write slowly, meticulously, slanted script wobbling across the page like it shivering too. You'd think this level of clerical energy would improve your life. No, it just ensures your misery is historically traceable. Even the dead need paperwork. If someone freezes, starves, or gets introduced to wolves in a permanent way, a report is written. Cause of death, winter. Cause of death, bear. Cause of death, fell asleep outside, poor choices. You get the sense that after a while, clerks stop trying new categories. Sometimes a government inspector visits. He arrives bundled in furs, looking like a disgruntled yak. He opens the ledgers, nods theatrically, then announces something obvious like, "It is cold here." He checks the list of exiles, counts noses, writes a note that says "still here," then leaves. His departure is the happiest moment of the year. The settlement has 1 or 2 scribes, which is just exile speak for anyone who can read without crying. They are the administrative backbone writing requests, copying orders, and occasionally forging permission slips so their friends can avoid mine duty. Naturally, they are beloved. Sometimes the Tsar sends new laws or policy updates. They arrive on wrinkled pages, faded, barely legible, probably written by someone who enjoys sentences with 40 commas. The guard reads them aloud, voice droning. No one listens. The laws never help. They simply state things like, all exiles must work diligently. Already doing that. Escape is illegal. No kidding. Wolves shall not be provoked. Tell the wolves. If you want anything done, food allotment, relocation, medical exemption, you must apply. This involves filling out a form shaped like false hope. You write your request. Someone stamps it. The stamp is important. The request is then sent to another settlement, then another, then to a larger town where a clerk uses it as a coaster. Eventually, months later, you get a response. Denied. Or worse, no response at all, administrative purgatory. Sometimes, because the state likes irony, you must pay fees. No money? No problem. They accept payment in labor. Coincidentally, everything you do is already labor, so it is unclear how this works. You pay for permission to keep paying. Punishments also come with forms. If you argue with a guard, forget to show up for logging, or sneeze suspiciously during roll call, a report is filed. If you do something really bad, like write a poem criticizing the czar's fashion choices, more paperwork appears. These papers are stored in a chest guarded by someone who definitely can't read. There's something comforting about bureaucracy, not emotionally but structurally. It reminds you that no matter how far you've traveled, how much you've suffered, there are still forms to fill, names to sign, lists to maintain. You could be standing on the edge of the earth surrounded by wolves, slowly turning into a popsicle, and someone will still hand you a quill and say, "Initial here." You develop coping strategies, learn to write quickly, copy signatures well, pretend you already submitted that form, claim a wolf ate it. Shockingly effective. Eventually you start joking about it. People say Siberia isn't a prison, it is an office without heating. You laugh, but it hurts because it is true. The ultimate irony, long after you die, your paper trail will remain. Somewhere in a dusty archive, a clerk will find your name, your crime, your date of exile. Maybe a note, worked hard, missing several toes, made a great stew, and that's your legacy frozen into history through bureaucracy. It's annoying. It's absurd. But somehow it means you are real. Here, when life can disappear overnight, paper sometimes remembers what people forget. Seasons do change in Siberia, just not in the way you'd hope. The transition is less spring awakening and more slightly different misery. Winter doesn't leave so much as it takes a smoke break. It wanders off for a few weeks, muttering, "Hold my frostbite," before returning with new enthusiasm. You first notice the shift not by warmth, but by sound. The ice starts cracking like Mother Nature is popping her knuckles. Snow melts into ankle-deep slush, turning the settlement into a vast soup of mud, regret, and the occasional boot no one feels like rescuing. Birds return, looking confused, like they took a wrong turn and hate it here. Spring is not flowers and sunshine, it is mud. Infinite mud. Mud so thick it could star in its own opera. You sink into it up to your shins, and when you pull your foot out, the mud keeps your boot as a souvenir. You consider negotiating, but the mud does not bargain. Someone suggests building walkways, but since wood is always needed for things like not dying, the idea dies immediately. The mud infiltrates everything. It sneaks into your hut, your clothes, your bowl. You eat porridge with hints of earth and think, at least it's extra minerals. When you sleep, the mud waits outside like an ex trying to just talk. You begin dreaming of dry ground like others dream of freedom, but on the bright side, no frostbite. Well, less frostbite. Mostly. As spring settles in, the forest wakes, trees bud, streams flow, small critters scurry around looking like they regret coming back. You hear dripping everywhere, snowmelt escaping the landscape like it is trying to flee Siberia too. You feel, for the first time in months, something resembling optimism. It lasts 12 minutes. Then come the mosquitoes. You thought wolves were bad. You were wrong. The mosquitoes arrive in biblical swarms, humming like tiny demons searching for souls. Each is the size of a thumbtack with an attitude problem. They bite through layers of fabric as if you were wearing scented tissue paper. You slap yourself repeatedly, looking like you're losing a public argument. Locals claim mosquitoes keep you warm by motivating you to run. You suspect the locals are joking. The mosquitoes do not joke. They feast. You are the feast. Still there is food. Berries appear. Fish return to rivers. Some exiles set traps for rabbits, adding variety to a diet that was previously bread that doubles as armor. The thawed earth yields roots, mushrooms, and occasionally mysterious plants you eat because someone shrugs and says, "Looks fine." If you wake up the next morning, congratulations, you guessed right. Work shifts too. Logging becomes slightly less miserable because your hands no longer freeze to the axe. Mining, however, becomes muddier, wetter, and full of dripping water that falls directly down your collar. Every day feels like laundry day for clothes you can to clean. Then, just when you adjust, summer arrives. Summer here is a loose concept. The temperature rises above freezing, which feels tropical. You immediately shed your heaviest furs and strut around in rags like you're starring in a fashion show themed desperation elegance. You bask on logs in patchy sunlight, soaking every bit of warmth like a lizard trying to spiritually recharge. The evenings, though, oh, they are lovely. The air softens, pine needles glow in golden light. Even the guards seem calmer. People sit outside, sharing stories and pretending life isn't constant survival. You begin to believe in happiness again. Then the mosquitoes return with friends. Summer is short. It passes like a suspiciously quick tax refund. One moment you're sweating. The next, a cold wind whispers, "Guess who is back?" You brace for autumn. Autumn is brief but beautiful. Leaves burst into yellows and reds, like nature is apologizing for everything. The mornings sparkle with frost. You forage like a frantic squirrel, storing anything edible because winter is pacing outside like a landlord ready to evict the sun. You begin winter prep, patching huts with mud, stocking firewood, drying fish, mending clothing with questionable skill. Hope fades faster than daylight, which now lasts roughly 3 seconds. Then, before you are mentally ready, winter returns. It doesn't knock. It kicks the door in, screaming, "Miss me?" And just like that, everything freezes again. The rivers lock. The world goes quiet. The wolves take attendance. Your breath becomes snowflakes. The stove becomes your religion. And your memories of warm days feel like hallucinations. But you remember, seasons do change. A little. Just enough to keep you curious. Just enough to remind you that nothing, not even winter, lasts forever. And then the cycle starts over. Mud bugs, slight happiness, leaves winter. Time moves, even here, even at the end of the world. Some exiles never return home. They build new families, blending cultures, and somehow life continues. You didn't plan on staying forever. Nobody did. Exile was supposed to be temporary years, maybe decades, but temporary. Yet time is strange in Siberia. The winters are eternal, the summers brief, and suddenly your hair is grey, and your kids are asking why the wolves bark in accent. There are many reasons people never make it back. For some, the paperwork simply never happens. Their sentence ends, but the notice arrives late, or the officials forget, or the messenger is eaten by a bear. Bureaucracy shrugs. Life goes on. Others physically can make the journey back, their bodies worn down by mining, logging, motherhood, or trauma. Some lose the money needed to return. Others lose their families entirely and realize there is nothing waiting for them. So they stay. And staying becomes more than survival. It becomes home. You meet locals, indigenous groups who have lived here longer than memory, settlers who arrived before you, even other exiles who came 30 years prior and have achieved the highest status available, guy who knows everyone and everything. At first you see them as evidence that leaving is impossible. Later you see them as proof that living is. People marry sometimes other exiles, sometimes locals. Traditions mix like soup ingredients no one expected to pair. Orthodox holidays celebrated alongside indigenous festivals. Russian lullabies sung in huts warmed by reindeer skins. Children raised bilingual, trilingual, or speaking a hybrid tongue that confuses everyone except grandma. Your children grow up thinking winter is normal. They outrun wolves with terrifying skill. They consider bread that could break a jaw a delicacy. They know how to fish through a hole in the ice before they know how to write their names. When you tell them that somewhere far away rain falls instead of snow, they squint like you're describing sorcery. Education exists, sort of. The smartest exile becomes the teacher. Lessons include math, reading, and the important art of not offending bears. Kids scribble on birch bark, their handwriting neat despite frozen fingers. At night, they perform silly plays about life in the motherland, though they've never seen it. Some exiles make their mark. Farmers introduce new growing techniques. Cooks teach recipes that rely heavily on whatever you found today. Musicians carve instruments and play songs at gatherings, where everyone pretends not to cry. Villages take shape. Huts multiply. Roads connect settlements. A small chapel rises from logs staffed, sometimes by a travelling priest who appears every few years like a religious migratory bird. Babies are baptized, weddings celebrated, funerals held. The cemetery is quiet and white, stones buried under snow half the year. These communities become cultural patchwork: Russian, Siberian, Polish, Jewish, Ukrainian, Baltic, Tatar, and more stitched together by cold winds and stubborn hope. A stranger might stumble into the village and hear 5 languages before breakfast. As the decades pass, the lines blur. Who is an exile? Who is a settler? Who belongs? Eventually everyone does. Stories of the homeland fade. Your children know the old country only through word of mouth. They imagine cities filled with endless bread and warm streets, practically heaven. But they also know the dangers of leaving. The journey back is expensive, risky, and deeply unknown. They wonder if they'd be seen as citizens or strangers. Some brave young souls do try to leave. A few succeed and return years later, describing bustling roads and strange foods that didn't come from a hole in the ice. Most, however, stay. Siberia, with all its roughness and sorrow, is their home. They know its rivers and forests better than any landscape you once knew. Over time, the stigma of exile softens. Families who arrived unwillingly become respected members of society. Farmers, traders, hunters, parents. Some descendants even grow wealthy through fur trading or mining. Others help build towns that will eventually appear on maps, replacing nameless blank space with new identity. Yet the memory of exile remains. At night, around fires, elders tell stories of the march east, of the bitter winters, of the moment they thought they'd die but didn't. Children listen, wide-eyed, unable to imagine life without endless snow. And here's the twist. When freedom finally comes years or decades later, many choose not to leave. Where would they go? Their homes are here. Their dead are here. Their memories, hard as life was, are here. Sometimes letters arrive from distant relatives in the old homeland urging them to return. The family gathers. They read the letter. They pass it around. Then someone shrugs and says, "But who will feed the goats?" And that is that. Life isn't what anyone intended, but it's life. Full, real, rooted. So yes, some exiles never return. Instead, they become founders, ancestors, the first of a lineage nobody planned but everyone carries with quiet pride. Generations grow, seasons repeat. The frozen wasteland becomes a homeland. Time takes everything, but it gives back too. Family, community, belonging. Somewhere between the cold and the wolves, you found home. And so you made it. You survived the march across half the planet. The bread that doubled as medieval construction material, the wolves with questionable social boundaries, and the winters that whispered, "You sure you want to do this?" Somehow, through cold, so sharp it shaved your will to live. and darkness that lasted longer than your optimism, you kept going. You worked the mines, swung the axe, hauled logs, patched huts with whatever was to nail down, and learned the sacred art of layering rags like a fashion-forward onion. You made friends other wanderers who arrived broken but learned to laugh through chattering teeth. You traded stories around smoky fires, built makeshift theatres, whispered prayers over boiling herbs, and wrote letters home on scraps of hope. You learned to trust warmth when it came, even if it was just from a wobbly stove or someone sitting close. You lost pieces of yourself, sometimes literally, to frostbite, exhaustion, time. But you gained things too: resilience, community, a jaw strong enough to bite through mineral-grade bread. You learned that survival isn't always about escape, sometimes it is about finding meaning inside the cage. And maybe one day you built a family, maybe you stayed, maybe generations of you grew strong in that frozen world, turning exile into legacy, turning Siberia from end of the earth into home. So tonight, as you tuck into your warm bed with plumbing, blankets that don't smell like smoke, and absolutely zero wolf patrols, maybe whisper a tiny thank you. Not to the Tsar. He gets nothing, but to the people who survived before you, the ones who endured ice, hunger, and boredom sharp enough to cut steel. Because history may be cold, bleak, and full of questionable soups, but is also proof that humans are stubborn, hopeful, and deeply ridiculous. Now, close your eyes. Wolves are far away. The fire is warm. You're safe. Sleep well.